got us unmuted. Just having a little trouble getting YouTube going, so just bear with us for a minute. Okay, Sarah Fox, I see that you are on. David Harris is not able to join us this evening, so I will call the meeting to order at 7:03. Matt Fox, I've got you up for commendations this evening.
Well, thanks. I have 3 commendations tonight. I'd like to start with commendating our new nurse this year, Andrew Rogoski. She's new to us this year, but has made an outstanding jump right into the fray, I guess you can say. She's hit the ground running, and we've only had, we've had less than 20 positive cases at our building. We've been pretty fortunate, but we also do internal tracking to make sure that our communication is upfront and complete with everybody who's handling COVID issues. So Drea, as we call her, Nurse Drea, has tracked over 228 different COVID instances or issues or things like that, which includes self-reported travel. So, I mean, she's done an outstanding job of making sure we stay on top of things. Sort of in the same vein, we'd like to recognize a staff member, another staff member, and one of our students who took it upon themselves to get vaccination appointments for a majority of our staff, and I believe even the superintendent sitting there. Leslie Dexter, one of our tutors, and Jared Kaplovich, one of our 8th graders, sat down and literally, I think, secured upwards of 30 or so vaccination appointments. And they did an outstanding job for our staff. And like I said, I believe Dr. Bucky received his appointment from Jared Kaplovich. And then using Jared as a segue to my next commendation, overall, we'd like to commend our Cornerstones, which is our volunteerism and leadership group, with assistance from the 2 advisors, Jen Vautour and Meredith Reardon, our guidance counselors. Our advisory board, which is comprised of Jared Kaplovich, William Cruikshank, Lonnie Gilmore, Sadie Newberg, Molly Blander, Will Cerruti, Addison Rotigliano, Olivia Goldwater, Greg Collins, and Molly Titus. And they've worked so hard this year to make this strange year sort of feel like a normal year for us. And they've run over 8 events already this year. They started with a spirit drive around winter vacation, a can drive around Halloween, Toys for Tots drive, which was one of our most successful ever with over 180 toys brought in. They ran a Jeopardy contest, a school-wide Jeopardy contest where there were 50 participants, 10 student teams, and 2 faculty teams. Today and tomorrow, actually, our Spirit Days are running too for the NCAA tournament. So everybody's wearing sports college gear to school. We have a talent show that they're trying to put together, which is the deadline tomorrow. So students all have that email that they can respond to if they have an interest in showing us one of their talents. We're finishing up also tomorrow a pajama and book donation drive. And then next Tuesday, March 23rd, we can advertise this to everybody. If you go to Mino's for either lunch or dinner, 20% of the daily sales will come back to the Cornerstones, which is then going straight to the Jimmy Fund. So they've done a lot of outreach and also some social events too for our students to try to make this unusual year feel a little bit more usual for us. So those are my 3 commendations.
Thank you so much, Matt. That last group, I can say, as a middle school parent, has done really great things in trying to kind of move this year along in some semblance of a normal direction. So thank you very much.
Can I just say, I am so glad that we added this to our agenda, because things like this, we would, probably not know all the great things that are happening through student-led and teacher-led, initiatives. So Matt, I'm really glad that we could have you. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. All right, does the committee have any commendations? So as I was pulling out of Village this morning after drop off and watching kids come in, I just want to commend the students because I think that they've done an excellent job of wearing masks. It's not the easiest of things. And as I was sitting in my car, pulling through the line, I just watched all of them just kind of, normally going about their school drop off with their masks on. And I was just really impressed. So I just wanted to give a shout out to all of the good mask wearers out there, because that, in my opinion, that is, what's keeping us afloat. I think data shows us that. So hats off to the students. All right. There's no other commendations. I will move us along to our student representative, Dan Howell. Dan, are you with us?
Yep. Hello. So first of all, the football team won their first game of the season against Beverly last Saturday. So in a normal year, the on game days, the cheerleaders and the football players will wear their uniforms. And last week, when they had their game, they brought that tradition back for the first time since last fall. And it's a small thing, but it was kind of funny when I saw that. I was kind of taken aback, because I was like, oh yeah, this didn't happen in the fall, but it's happening now, and it's just good to see normal things happening, essentially. One of our school social workers, Mr. Ed Reiner, has been hosting 20-minute Zoom meetings for each grade to allow students to have a chance to discuss and reflect on the past year and all that has occurred. So we really appreciate having opportunities like those to express how we're feeling, especially at times like these when a lot of our typical events are being canceled and things like that. So having a space for that to happen has been great. The Jewel Tones a cappella group came in second at their virtual ICHSA international competition for high school a cappella quarterfinal, and then we'll be moving on to the semifinal round. The Jefferson Forum Club is holding a food drive for the whole month of March. And finally, we have a scheduled change starting on April 5th. So this was just recently announced, and now students are beginning to talk about it and discussing how we're feeling about it. And I think that the overwhelming response is positive from students. They're excited to see both cohorts and just have more normal days. So we'll be in school each of the 5 days now: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but half days, and then the online classes in the afternoon. So another step in the right direction. And then a bit later in April, we'll be having full days where students will even have lunch at the school. So we're getting there, and we're almost back. So lots of good things are happening.
Great, thank you, Dan.
Can I ask you, Dan, a quick question? So with the new information that's come out that anybody 16 or older will be eligible for a vaccine on April 19th, is there any, student discussion about that? Or are you guys kind of trying to find a way to help each other get those appointments? Or is it, I know it just happened, but.
Yeah, definitely. I know that a number of students, have been working to pre-register. I know you can do that on the Massachusetts .gov website. Additionally, a lot of teachers have talked about, they've gotten the chance to get the vaccine. So now that's kind of being pushed onto not being pushed onto the students, but now it's the students' opportunity to do so as well. So I think a lot of us are really eager particularly the seniors, as you know, we're mostly old enough, 17 and 18. So we're looking forward to it and excited about it.
Good to hear.
Great. And thank you, Dan, for the update on as we push further in person with the 5 half days and then the 5 full days. It's great to hear that students are seeing that as a positive, as a whole. I'm sure there's a handful that are concerned, but it's really, that's great feedback to know.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, that leads us to public comment. Anyone who wants to make public comment can raise their hand and I will call on them. When I get called on, please state your name and your address for the record. Catherine Martin, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, good evening, Catherine Martin, 29 West Shore Drive. I just wanted to note that the packet tonight for the school committee meeting did not get posted until 6:58 p.m. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of us were at the budget subcommittee hearing and a lot of people wanted a copy of the Excel spreadsheet that Michelle projected onto the screen that showed kind of the budget tracking, at which point we were told we couldn't have it because other school committee members hadn't seen it yet, which quite frankly isn't the truth because it was a public document the minute it was shared in that public meeting and it should have been made available to the public. And multiple people had asked for it. So I think it's a little disappointing that it didn't get posted till 6:58 tonight. The other thing is I know that there isn't a COVID spending update tonight. That being said, if you're going to launch a major fundraising campaign, and listen, I have nothing but respect for the boosters, the PTO, the PCOs. I've worked with all of those groups over the years. But you need to come and be transparent about how we are using our COVID spending before we go to our parents and ask them to help pay for what's been deemed as the opening of school. I think that, everyone likes to throw around these words about transparency and collaboration. Well, that's transparency, is getting out there and saying, listen, we got this $450,000. We've got 200,000 of it earmarked, but we've got this gap and we need tents. Whatever it is, just get it out there, get it to the public. It will get rid of the conjecture and get it in a timely manner so that people have questions, they can bring them up at public comment. And that's it. I'm just hoping that, as the year goes on, we can start to get a little better at these things so that those of us who are trying to follow along can follow along. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. I believe, John, you're going to address some of that this evening in your update. Great, thank you. All right, I don't see anybody else's hand raised. So we will move along to approval of the minutes. We had one set of minutes in the Dropbox today, and it was February 4th. Is there any additions or anything that needed to happen, Sarah?
I had a few, yeah. So Alexa Kearney's name was spelled incorrectly, and her son below, Niles, of the same last name. I know that what was there wasn't it, but I don't know which order the 2 letters go in. So I believe it. I know that we can get it through Aspen, and I believe Alexia has emailed us before, so we can get that easily. And then under the pool testing, I wanted to have it noted that David Harris and I had voiced concerns that there seemed to be a discrepancy from what we had read in the guidance from the state with what was being presented. And I know that Amanda Rivers did a tremendous amount of work after, the following presentation and helped to really get those clarifications out, but I just wanted that noted. And then at the end, the statement, where it was noted that the chairman had a prepared statement in regards to Miss Martin's memo. I would like to have the original memo by Miss Martin as well as the prepared statement by Miss Gold added to the record of these minutes.
Okay, sounds good. You can definitely work with Lisa on all of those things. So can I get a motion to accept the minutes for February 4th, 2021 with the addition of the comments made by Sarah Fox? Megan moved. Emily second. All right, Sarah Gold, yes. Megan Taylor, Emily Barron.
Yes.
And Sarah Fox.
Yes. I don't know if we can put a mic near Megan and Emily, but I can't even hear if they're responding at all.
Okay, they'll speak up a little bit. I can, no, I can't move the computer.
So
So,
I didn't speak that loud
And I
with my
didn't
yes,
either.
so sorry.
all right, that passes 4-0. So that leads us to the superintendent's report. Got quite a few things on there. And John, I will let you tee up Dr. Benedetto's presentation.
Yeah, Dr. Benedetto has been a great proponent for looking at how we do busing in the district. She's put a good deal of time into a proposal, and because it has a fee associated with the proposal, I thought it should come before school committee so you could hear the thinking behind it. But I just want to commend her for all the work that she has done, and I think that you'll really appreciate what she's put together. So, Dr. Benedetto.
Hello?
Jessica, when
Yep.
you're ready for, yes, when you're ready for me to put up the map, I will share the screen and put up the map. Okay, just let me know.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you know. Good evening to everyone, and thank you to Dr. Bucky for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I'd like to propose a pilot program of a neighborhood bus with kids of all grades. The rationale behind this pilot program is to start with a small area town and one bus. And this small pilot will introduce the idea of expanding busing to our community without adding to the school budget for this year. The pilot program is to start when the new Brown School opens. The location of the Brown School creates a state mandated required busing from the tip of the peninsula, essentially Old Town, Reds Pond area, around by Gracie Oliver and through the Beacon Street area. This is based on the 2-mile distance rule for K through 3 students. This is based on DESE's bus transportation policy. This proposal is designed to both maximize utilization of this bus in a budget neutral way and also potentially defray the cost of the bus by attracting families willing to pay for a bus pass. Additionally, this bus will provide a safe, reliable form of transportation for families living off of Beacon Street. DESE guidelines state that all child pedestrians, quote, shall have a commonly traveled route with a sidewalk accessible to pedestrian traffic, end quote. Beacon Street does not fall under these guidelines as a safe walking route, regardless of a child's grade level. In relating the distance rule to determine a publicly funded bus, DESE clearly states that, quote, exceptions to this policy may be made when road conditions do not provide for the physical safety of the children, end quote. The Lynn Public School Systems has stated explicitly in its policy, quote, the students will not be required to walk down primary streets that do not provide adequate sidewalks, end quote. Beacon Street has also been deemed unsafe for children walking to school based on the Safe Routes to School audit completed this January for the Village School. For these safety reasons, children in grades K through 12 should be offered a publicly funded bus pass if they live in this area in which there is no safe walking alternative. Maximizing student utilization of this bus, in addition to promoting walking for students who live closer to our schools, will both serve to decrease parental traffic and congestion. In the Safe Routes to School safety audit and morning drop-off, the auditor counted 163 cars on the Jersey Street loop, 119 in Village Street, 31 in the bus loop, 37 walkers, and 6 bikers. She referred to the dismissal behind Village as a, quote, free-for-all, with idling cars lined up for 20 minutes before and after dismissal. This was done with the hybrid, with smaller cohorts going to school. So now the problem will become much worse. The pilot bus program would include 3 populations. Sarah, if you can put up the map. And the colors on the map include riders in K through 3, who the town must pay for a bus to the Brown School. And this is based on the 2-mile distance rule, the red area on the map. And then potentially the bus could utilize riders in K through 12 whose parents may choose to purchase a bus pass, which is the yellow area on the map. The third population may be included from the Beacon Street area based on hazard busing, taking into account both DESI's guidance on what constitutes a safe walking route and also the safe routes to school audit done for Village. The pilot bus program would include 7 pickup spots and drop off students at or near 4 schools: Village, Vets, Baldwin, Pleasant intersection near the high school, and the Brown School. Pilot program would include morning and afternoon busing options for a fee of $300 per student or $450 for a family maximum. This is for families who don't qualify for the publicly funded busing. Families may apply to purchase a bus pass on a first-come, first-served basis, with priority given to families who live the largest distance from their respective schools. The goal would be to get enough interest, including paying families, to maximize allowed occupancy on the bus. This would maximize the fees added to the budget paid by parents, and this would offset the required fixed costs of the bus, driver salaries, maintenance, etc. Offering a neighborhood bus to children of all grades is the best way to increase demand and make the option more convenient for parents. Thus, the parents would be more likely to purchase bus passes to avoid driving children of varying ages to multiple schools. Ideas to manage a bus with children of all ages include a required seating plan by grade: the older kids in the back third of the bus, the Village kids in the middle third of the bus, and the elementary kids in the front third of the bus. We could set up expectations up front about bus behavior, and parents and children could sign a bus behavior contract at the start of the year, and this would outline a policy to address if there's any behavioral issues on the bus. With the consolidation of our schools, Coffin and Eveleth gone, with adding only Brown School, there is a decreased need for crossing guards at each school. This could be used to add a bus monitor. The length of the pilot would be 1 year, and the school department could ask for feedback from pilot parents at the end of the year. Feedback can create areas for improvement with the idea of expansion of busing to other neighborhoods if the pilot goes well. Also, at the end of the pilot, a general survey to all parents about expanding busing would go out to gauge interest in busing from other neighborhoods and to determine the potential for expansion. Starting this pilot with the Beacon Street neighborhood is ideal because it captures the population who lives the farthest away from all schools and therefore are the least likely to walk due to distance and safety concerns. This pilot will allow the school department and school committee to have a cost-benefit analysis to help decide about expanding our busing budget in upcoming years. We will have valuable information on how to make the bus appealing and convenient enough for parents to purchase a pass. Bus stop locations for pickup allow children in these catchment areas to have a short walk to their bus stop and a drop-off at or near their school. The green dots show the bus stops, which go through Old Town, around by Gracie Oliver, and through to the Evans Street, West Shore Drive area. Drop-off stops are also shown with the stars at each of the schools. In conclusion, this proposal will have a number of potential benefits for our community. First, it will provide expanded access to safe and reliable transportation to school for many students who live in sections of town where there are currently no safe walking or biking routes to their schools. Second, if we can generate enough interest, this program can produce revenue to help offset the cost of the new bus required by the location of the new Brown School. Third, by increasing access and utilization of public transportation, we can decrease the pollution and congestion caused by hundreds of individual vehicles currently needed for school pickup and drop-off daily. Lastly, increasing access to busing will help to bring Marblehead up to par with the busing programs that are already offered in many of our neighboring communities. And don't our kids deserve that? Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Obviously, you put a lot of work into that, and it was very thorough and helpful. John, did you want to follow up with anything on that?
Yep, this has been on the radar for Michelle Cresta, and we met this week, and she's investing in some routing software to look at bus routes, and this information will certainly be helpful. And clearly, she has invested, Dr. Benedetto has invested a lot of time in this, and I think you see firsthand the proposal, and I just would like the blessing to continue down the path to explore this further.
Can I say something?
Yes, Sarah, I see your hand up too. Megan, go ahead.
So Jess, thanks so much for putting this together and all your hard work on it. I think busing has been a topic that we've been batting around for a while now. So I think this really gives us some traction on it. And I love the idea of a pilot program to
Stop it. I'm going.
figure out how it could work before we kind of go whole hog. I always think kind of pilot programs are a great idea. And obviously Dr. Benedetto raised a number of reasons why it's beneficial for our town. So I am very much for you continuing to work on this. I think, I do have a few questions about it, but they're more detailed and probably things that you'll work out and come back to us with. So I definitely support it and just want to thank you, Jess, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Megan.
Sarah, go ahead.
I thought I was on mute. I'm going to apologize right here and now for. I really thought I was on mute. You could hear me saying I'm going to go off mute. You got to pull it together. So I apologize. So first of all, thank you, Jess. I know you've worked really, really hard on all of this. A few things popped up on this. First of all, we are absolutely positively, from what I read in this budget, not carrying the budget to add an additional bus for FY22 above and beyond what we're carrying right now. It was not listed as a budget priority. It was not listed as a new line item. So either we're able to fit those kids on a new bus or we missed something. So we got to go back and look at that. It was something that came up a lot during the feasibility study. At one point, I recall Ken actually had a stopwatch and was riding the bus to figure out who went where, when, and how. And we carried the estimate of $60,000 that it would cost to add that additional bus. That's what a bus roughly, as of 2 years ago, cost for a year. And that was mainly in staffing, because as you know, we own our buses or lease them. So that was in fuel and things like that, staffing, fuel, and everything else. So we need to look into why we aren't carrying that in the budget and if we should be. Next, as far as
I was under the assumption that we've gotten 2 new buses in the past couple of years. One that I remember from under Ken.
We're not carrying staff to run that additional bus. We don't run that many bus routes right now.
Okay, but the bus is not the issue.
It's not the actual physical bus. We own that. It's the fuel and the staff. So we'll
Sarah, I just wanted to mention, so the current situation is that when Gary closed and kindergarten had to move to Eveleth, which is across town from Gary, the response was, we're going to offer a bus from Gary. And
no, I remember all that, Jess. You're
yeah, and then currently the bus is from Coffin, and so that busing from Coffin is really extremely inconvenient in terms of routing to bring a child to Coffin to then be bused to Eveleth. And that's and and if you look at the other areas of town, Marblehead Neck has a bus that goes all the way around the neck and brings children within walking distance of their houses.
Yeah, right now the policy is they're 2 different things. One's we call the courtesy bus, and you don't need to be a distance away. It was for the transition. So you're totally on target for what we promised during the study, but they're kind of currently working as 2 different functions. But that's kind of, I'm not opposed to this at all. I just want to make sure we're actually including what we're supposed to in our budget. And then the next piece is, I actually don't think we should be charging anybody as a courtesy bus. I think this is a sustainable idea. I think it's something we want to be moving towards. The idea of charging kids kind of feels a little bit more like we're, again, dividing, people of means and people not of means, because if your family can pay, you can get to school a little bit safer. And if your family can't pay, then you can't. So I would say we just should do this pilot program and not attach a fee to it would be My take on it, because I want to make sure we're providing equity. And again, it's safer for kids, and also it gets cars off the road, helps the traffic in town. And sustainability wise, this is a really big deal. More cars off the road, more people in buses, community bus stops, that benefits us all. So, I totally support this, but I just wanted to make sure that we really are carrying it in the budget for next year. And also I didn't want to charge students. And currently we don't bus anybody to the high school, so we need to look at that policy.
But I think that in the middle school as well, I think we bus K to 6.
Correct.
Emily?
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So because the red shaded area from Jess's map, and thanks Jess for putting all this together, they have to be bused next year, K through 3 anyway, right? So that's already been figured out.
Correct. I think
For the
K through
brown
6.
K through 6 gets bused.
Does that, does
Well,
that?
so it's whoever is 2 miles or more from
Right.
their school. So because Village is in essentially the middle of town, there's no one in that area that would be 2 miles from Village School. However,
Gotcha.
because of the Brown
Gotcha.
School,
Sorry.
yeah, there's going to be kids going to the Brown School who are more than 2 miles.
Right. So they have to be.
Yes.
It's just K through 3
Yeah.
for Brown.
Yeah.
Yes.
That has to be accommodated. And then the piece about charging for the bus, I think that's a pretty standard practice. And I'm pretty sure that if your family could not afford the bus, we would offer subsidies for that. And we would never not let anyone ride a bus that could not afford it, because I know we don't practice that in this town, and that's not something that I think ever happens. I just want to make that clear, that anyone who would ride a bus would be offered the bus.
Yeah, that's a good point. It would be structured like the sports and activities fee. Yeah.
That's how we do everything.
Yep. All right. Well, I mean, it sounds
I do
like,
think the divide still exists, though, with people not being comfortable asking for that help. And so they sometimes kind of like hold back. I don't want to jump ahead, but we know Nan's going to be presenting some information on equity and openness as far as certain tuitions go. And I think that this, would fall in the same vein of if they can't walk safely to school by the state DESE guidelines, I would say that there is a onus on us to get them there.
so I think that's noted. And I think, this is one of those pieces we talk about with other fees that we charge with athletics and with kindergarten of, where is the line there? So it's, I think this just kind of adds to that, and absolutely, as the administration continues to dig deeper into this, can certainly vet that type of stuff out. All right, so it sounds like, John, that the committee has support. Do you want an official motion on that? Okay. All right. So yeah, so you guys will move forward, and thank you, because that is something that has absolutely been coming up for quite a few years. I mean, as long as I've been on the committee, and I'm glad that we're starting to chip away at that a little bit. Thank you, Dr. Benedetto, very much.
Thank you.
All right, John, keep going.
All right, I have the pool testing update. This was shared with the committee. Just some fun facts if you are a data person. I think Amanda and Greg provided you some interesting stats. And as of late this afternoon, they had done another pool of athletes. So these numbers are old, but it's interesting to see that, over 700 tests would be the number now. The average number included in a pool, the largest, the smallest, staff by school. We also have only one positive case, which they gave you the percentage for, and then some information on athlete testing and how that program is going. I wanted to give Greg and Amanda the night off so that they didn't have to. I know that they're probably in the audience, but if anybody has any pool testing questions, they presented this morning as well. And so hopefully I should be able to field those if this raises questions.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that we've got this information, and it's great to see it all sort of in action and moving forward. Exciting.
I might anticipate a question is if we will be continuing full testing after the free trial is over. And DESE has still not gotten final figures to districts on the cost of the supplies and materials. And so I will have that at a future meeting for you once that is done.
John, can you refresh my memory on when, I know the DESE program was extended, but what date are they at right now?
It goes through spring break, April
Okay.
18th.
Okay.
Megan?
Any timeline from DESE? Like any expectation of when we might have those costs?
No,
Because then we'll still be responsible for organizing all the pieces,
Correct.
right? Because they're not organizing it for us. We would then have to reach out to the vendors and all those pieces.
Correct.
Okay.
On that question, is it going to be somewhat seamless? Have they provided any information like that?
well, I think we would continue with Beacon.
Mhm.
And so we wouldn't have to go out and find a new, it's just getting those final figures. And we do have a nurse out on leave right now, and Amanda is doing this full testing. And so, we haven't had anyone to fill the long-term substitute position. And I know there's some concern about if a nurse has to be out and being able to cover the district. And if we continue with full testing, those will be pieces that we'll need to answer.
I'm probably a bit premature here, but just since we're talking about it, I mean, I'm hoping that you're also, even though we're not sure what the exact cost is going to look like, thinking about how we might implement it if we were going forward. Does it need to be the whole district? Would it be certain grades? Would it, just thinking about how we might, so that when we get that information, we can literally just plug it into whatever spreadsheet or whatever you're working through.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. I hope that those numbers come back reasonable, because I think this is a valuable program. So, especially as we
Yeah.
push further in person.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And just another shout out to Amanda and Greg for putting this together, because 700 tests with pretty much Amanda and Greg doing it is amazing. So just a big thank you to them.
So in-person instruction update, K-6 started 5 days a week. We're 4 days into it. And I will say I have received so many grateful emails from families indicated. I actually had a parent approach me at the gym on Sunday saying that she got a lump in her throat at Target because it was like back to school shopping. And so many families have said that they actually got teary on Monday when they were dropping their students off. So things are going well. Each of the principals reported out this morning at the reopening meeting, kind of the wows and wonders that have come up this week. And I think that, number one under the superintendent's report was transportation. And that was one of the wonders that came up, that transportation is an issue in this district. And when the combined cohorts drop off and pick up doubled. And so there were some hiccups, as we like to say. And so those principals are working on those to make sure that pickup and drop off is more seamless next week. I think is a way to capture that. 7
I
to
also
12.
don't think it helped that it was below zero on that first day.
Absolutely.
That certainly, I've walked most of the days, but that day was not a walking day. So
I was at Glover and Mr. Odo was devastated that all of their outdoor planning and their banner got whipped in the wind and their balloons all had to come in. But it was an exciting morning. And I enjoyed being at Glover. And I think Nan was at Coffin or Village, and just the kind of excitement and energy really was like the first day of school.
Before we get to 7 and 12, I thought about doing a commendation, but I think it fit better here just because, we talked about it in one of our previous meetings about the anxiety of this change and all the work that the teachers and the staff had to do to get us to this point, and families too, to kind of prep their students.
Mhm.
I had one other group, the custodians. This came up in Central Council over the weekend. They moved 35 classrooms in Village, and they just did it without a hitch, and so they also need to be.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Thought of that.
I guess the point is it's been a team effort. It's been a community and school and teacher and student, and not to like jinx us at all, but this first 4 days has been a success. And the students that I've heard from have been so happy. So I'm glad we took this step, and I'm thankful for everyone who's put in the hard work to get here. And I'm looking forward to getting the next round of students in person. So I just felt like this might be a natural place to say that.
And all of that planning continues for 7 to 12.
Yep.
And Matt and Dan reported out this morning that Matt actually made me chuckle. He said he's no longer going to try to predict what will happen because he had about half of his full remote families say they wanted to come back in person. And I think if you'd asked us 2 weeks ago, the worry or the concern was what happens if we have a mass exodus out of our hybrid in learning program going to remote. And Dan reported out similar numbers at the high school. So we continue to plan for an April 5th launch, 7 to 12. Kindergarten was a question that came up, and I have to give full credit to Nan Murphy for this idea, and I'm actually going to let Nan describe it to you. I did give you a heads up via email about looking at a full day kindergarten program. So Nan, if you'd like to describe your great thinking on that.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I had sent John an email recently proposing that our district recognize that this has been a complex year, and if ever there's a time to think about equity and access and inclusion, it's this year. And as we go into our final 3.5 months of school, I'd like to propose that Marblehead Public Schools offers the opportunity of a full day for kindergarten students that is not fee-based, that all students are permitted to come and attend a full day of learning and practice and rehearsals and quality instruction and quality social emotional experiences, and that we remove the barrier of finances should any family in the district be experiencing any pandemic related hardships, or just completely remove that, as it's not a situation right now that we have planned on for certain funding, that we maybe lift that barrier away for families. So that's the proposal I put forward, and I'm hoping that we're able to bring all of our kindergartners back for full day learning.
I completely support Anne.
Great.
Nan, can you just talk a little bit about what those afternoons would look like?
Perfect. So I have met with principals. I met with principals on Monday at leadership, and then I followed it up with meeting with our kindergarten staff yesterday. And we talked about stamina for our little students and the way classrooms are structured right now. They are very structured. Kids are sitting at desks, and we are very cognizant of our 6 feet distancing at this point. So it was agreed that the morning hours would be spent primarily on content, the ELA, the math, the focused review and drills. And our afternoons would be spent with more tactile play, outside experiences, hands-on science, any opportunity that we have for more physical engagements outside. The kindergarten teachers were talking about great opportunities they've always been able to provide their kindergartners, such as nature walks and things like that. So we talked about talking with transportation, getting buses to be able to take our kindergartners in the afternoons on little afternoon excursions around town for different hands-on type of play and experiences. So the structured learning piece would really be concentrated in the morning with review and maybe some small group review and practice in the afternoons with teachers, but the primary focus being on hands-on activities and curriculum in the afternoons.
And then in terms of timeline, would it follow the same timeline that we're looking at for the other elementary school grades?
It would be exactly the same.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think, the kindergartners haven't had a real school, traditional or typical school experience yet. So I think, these last 3 months, especially since they will be going into first grade a full day, I think that makes sense, and let them, get some experience before September. I think that makes sense. I think it's a great idea, Nan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Sarah, I see your hand raised.
So to piggyback off that, this is something that's come up, at budget season for multiple years. And when we kick around the idea of, will we do an override? When will we do an override? What will we look at? And what are our priorities? This idea that we're charging for kindergarten full day tuition here, while there's some towns still doing it, the majority of Massachusetts do not. And the reason is because it does impede equity, access, and inclusion. Even though we have tuition assistant programs, again, there's, often people who aren't comfortable asking for that, or they'd rather just do the half day and not go down that road. So this has been something that's come up. I wish we were in a position to do it for next year, to be perfectly honest. I think, this is the right first step, but I don't think I think that we should be offering a full day kindergarten program. That's what we want an education to look like in Marblehead. And, anybody that's had a first grader in the last few years, or in the, last several years, knows the caliber of what we need them to know. And they really need this full day. So I fully support this, but I would like us to take it a step further and see if, if we can't do it next year, which really would be a shame and is a shame. When can we do it, and where does that fit into our strategic plan? But I think, Nan hit it on the head. It's equity, it's access, and it's inclusion. And if those are priorities for our students, this is what we do.
Sarah, I was just thinking strategic plan as you were talking.
I just want to say that I support full day kindergarten as well. I think we're, like Sarah said, one of the very few who still, charge a fee for that afternoon. And it's like, especially in Marblehead, we should be providing that full day for everybody. So I support that too. When we can get it, and when we figure out the best time to start that, I think as soon as possible, we're working towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another thing, as I kind of alluded to earlier, that continually comes up as we talk about, where we'd like to see Marblehead schools be as we move into the future. So great. Thank you, Nan.
And then just some other pieces of our planning.
Do we not need a motion for that? Because our policy is that we charge for kindergarten tuition. So if we're changing a policy, even if temporarily for the rest of the school year, I would think we would need a motion to change that.
It's not something we've been doing at all this year. So I don't know that we need one.
Okay.
If we haven't had one at this point. I mean, I can definitely check it, and we can, if we need it, we can put it on and vote it next time.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're going against a written policy, that we're within the confines of where we need to be.
Yep, I'll look into it.
And then we talked about lunch, and then with change in distance, what quarantine would look like, and consideration of close contacts. And so we continue to plan for April 5th and are making good progress to that end.
Yeah, I think, I think this has come up a few times at this point. I think it's, and I actually had quite a few texts about it this week, about the number of high school students that continually come out positive. That's kind of where we're seeing it at this point. And it is worrisome as we start to push towards a 3-foot distance, because that does mean that in the past, anybody who has tested positive hasn't really impacted anybody who's learning in the learning space. That's about to change. And so I think, we've done this a few times, but I think the call for, honesty within the community, of reporting, any kind of not feeling well, any kind of exposure, and really, where everybody wants in-person learning, and this is a massive priority for us right now, and it's a priority for almost everybody. And so I just really, I would really like to ask that it's prioritized in everybody's daily behavior as well, in that, it's going to start impacting people who would not otherwise have been impacted. And, it may be an unpopular opinion, but that just keeps weighing on me.
So just to clarify, so right now, if someone is symptomatic or test positive, it's the 6 foot close contact radius, right? So because they're at 6 foot in their cohorts, it's not an issue. But bringing them together and in some cases reducing that distance, now that radius includes other students.
Correct.
So therefore, it's not just that one person who is symptomatic, it's then everyone in their radius who would then also have to quarantine, right?
Correct.
So that's really the crux of the issue.
Right. And when we start to talk about, the reduced distancing at this point of what we're working with is our older kids. And so it's the kids who are traveling classes who switch every period. And so it's not only as if it would be in a grade school classroom where it's those handful of kids, it's those handful of kids in every single class at that point. And so you're really talking about a pretty big impact on one positive case. And, I do have worries in the background about, if it could jeopardize our ability to pull off, as we've talked about in the past, when we were looking at remote versus hybrid, of building level situations that could cause a building to have to take a step back. And I just really don't want us to have to take any steps back. I really just want us to push forward. And this is sort of that 1 week link that, there could be others that I just don't foresee, but this is one that I could foresee becoming problematic.
I think this is why DESE still has not provided dates for high schools. That's Marblehead with this, in the sincere belief in our parents and our students and our families that honesty is the best policy, that we're not coming to work if we don't feel well. We're not sending students to school that might have symptoms, and that the daily attestation form is something that we take very seriously in order to be able to do this and to maintain.
Sarah, I know you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so looking at that, this really makes, I'm wondering, do we currently or have a plan or are we working on one on how these children who would need to quarantine for however many days will be educated? Because right now I think that they do the remote portion now, but where that will be gone, and the high school doesn't have like a program like the elementary schools where you could jump into a remote class if there was space. How will we educate these students? Will it be fully asynchronous, whereas like it's just, Google Classroom or something like that? Or will they actually have instruction during that, 10 days, 7 days, 14? That number moves around. I don't know what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was brought up at reopening this morning, and Matt and Dan talked about things that will be in place and things that they're currently working with faculty on. It's easier for sure. Nothing's easy, but Matt indicated teams at the middle school where students that would have to quarantine, how that would work. And Dan is working. There are some teachers that have the ability to do simultaneous or live streaming. Others do not. So I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis in some instances. But again, I think that's why Sarah's point and Megan's point about making sure that we're all adhering so that the instances of this are limited.
I do think there's some really interesting data coming down the pike too about distancing. There was a really great study that was done in Massachusetts on the 6 foot to 3 foot distancing and the differences. And so, I think that there's hopefully some changes in guidance that might be coming, but for now we are where we're at. And I think just that plea to kind of wear a mask when you're outside of school, and it can just be a lot safer.
So my other question with bringing the high school kids back, and this is probably gonna make Dan and Dr. Bucky as a former high school principal shudder, but have we looked at what some towns are doing, I think Swampscott's doing it, the idea of returning to an open campus. So during like lunch, when they're on mass, for a student that drives or whatever, they could go home during that period. I know it was, standard in Marblehead years ago. It had its pitfalls at the time, and it, definitely had its positives if she asked some of the students. But whereas other districts have looked at this as a way to minimize spread, quarantining, things like that, have we looked at it?
I think everything is on the table. It reminds me in 1999 when I did my administrative internship at Watertown High School, they tasked me with looking at open campus. And every school that I called that had it was trying to get rid of it. And every school that didn't have it was trying to implement it. But I think if there were ever time we're looking at options, especially at lunch, and Deanna did go over lunch this morning at reopening, but being creative at the high school is going to be a necessity.
I would actually put a word of caution in on open campus at this point, because I think, and this is anecdotal, but I think some of the things that we hear right now are that when kids get into their cars, the masks come off and they're together and the masks are off. And we know for sure, and the data supports this all over the place, that when they're in school buildings, they're at their safest because the mitigation is in effect. And so I would just that would be my caution on that. I don't have anything against open campus, generally speaking. It makes me a little antsy right now.
So
Dr. Bucky, if I could make a comment, Dan Bauer and I have recently had a conversation about this very thing. We've had a couple of parents reach out, and currently the high school lunch blocks are only going to be a half an hour, which does not provide enough time for students to get safely off campus and return safely to campus, and where there won't be any afternoon remote instruction. So we want to try to encourage people to stay on campus during that time. And that's why I did add an additional tent at the high school for some back outside eating spaces for kids, because we are really trying to be creative in where we put students and be able to keep them distanced as much as possible during that block of time, but really try our best to keep them on campus as well.
That's a good public service announcement for your tent campaign, Nan. I was just getting ready to turn it over to you to talk about the kindergarten to grade 8 math curriculum update. So that ties in nicely.
Perfect. So the math committee met today. We've been on a roll. They have sat through hours and hours and hours of presentations by different vendors that they have selected through a rubric and some different state provided guidance that we're using to choose and select evidence-based curriculum that's being well used and showing positive results throughout the nation and districts in Massachusetts as well. So today they met to review. I was in another meeting. So our assistant principal, Steve Gallo, chaired our committee today, and they had kind of taken a minute to step back and to refresh their memories about everything that they've seen thus far, and also to talk about the materials that have been delivered to schools, how those are getting presented and in the hands of teachers, and then giving the people on the committee the opportunity to speak to the lessons that they've been piloting. So not only are we listening to vendors and researching programs, teachers are actually at this point in the process modeling using the materials. So today was unpacking kind of those things that they've discovered. At this point, there are 2 programs that the committee is considering. Although we were really hoping to find a K-8 program, there is consensus around a K-6 program and consensus around our K-5 program and consensus around a 6, 7, and 8 program. So we haven't gotten to the vertical piece, which is okay. They are they appeal developmentally to the age groups that that they're being presented to. So it's not uncommon for teachers at different levels to have a discrepancy around programming. So we have one more presenter that's coming next Thursday. The materials are already on campus and being distributed to teachers. Some of those teachers are already piloting. We have some people on the committee that have had experience, myself included, with the program that is coming on Thursday. So we have a little bit of an understanding of what that program offers. And Megan, I know you'll be interested to hear this. The one that we're looking into on Thursday of next week also comes with an assessment opportunity. So it actually comes with at an additional cost, but one that's reasonable. You are able to access their assessment components in both math and ELA. So that'll be an interesting, it's the only vendor that we're looking at that has that opportunity for us. We did initially have next week as our date where we wanted to announce what program we had selected. But in true transparency, we weren't going to push through a process like this to beat the budget. We really wanted to make sure we got the right program. And so I think what we've done is put a fair number in the budget as to what we think a good program is going to cost. But we are a little bit behind the timeline that we had set forth with, but we're ready. We'd rather go slow and steady and make sure we get to the right destination and then be too swift and maybe hear about a great program that we wish we had taken time to look at. Sarah?
I see your hand up.
Thank you, Nan. So is it unusual? I know it's hard to say because we're one of only 2 districts in the whole state that have the K3, 4, 6 model. Is it unusual to have 2 different math curriculums in play within the same school building? And will that present a problem at all with alignment within that building?
I appreciate you asking that question because it is something that we've talked about, especially where we are thinking of bringing instructional specialists in to support staff. So it certainly is a consideration that we're going to have as a team as we narrow down our process. Because if we're bringing on additional coaching staff, asking a member of in that role to build content knowledge and pedagogy around 2 different programs and work with teams within one building, that would be a hard ask.
And also likewise, if we had 2 people doing that, it'd be hard to bridge, the way we present things at the middle school is very different than the teaching model we use at Village. So that would be a hard juxtaposition as well, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then the other thing is, this is 2 programs now versus 1. So are we talking 2 times the cost? I mean, I'm guessing we don't get a deal because we buy a second.
No, it wouldn't be an additional cost because it's per pupil typically.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So there's not a cost like what we saw last year just to buy into their online support service.
Nope.
Okay.
The one piece that I do want to add, part of the conversation around budgeting was when we were looking at priorities and trying to decipher where does the math program fit in terms of a budget priority, the conversation was around one-to-one devices for students. So a lot of all of the programs that we're looking at have really rich and engaging online activities for kids. And it goes in their instructional, they're not just activities. It's to the extent where a teacher can actually log on and watch a student do some work at home during homework time and provide real-time feedback via the technology piece. So the question I was posing was around, if we purchase a program and can't use a lot of the tools that make it such a great investment for the district, is it the right time where we don't have some of the components necessary. But then Steve has done such a great job since he's been here. He helped to build the understanding that we're almost at one-to-one and expects to be at one-to-one at the elementary levels next year. So that kind of took it, put it back into perspective as around it being a budget priority for this budget.
That's so great to hear, because especially with the Brown School coming online, we have a lot of wiggle room in that FF&E to really purchase some of those devices for the majority of the bulk of our K through third graders. But I'd hate to see us put off a math curriculum because, you know, as far as our strategic planning goes, or our structural, you know, issues with our budget, that we can't afford to, you know, do the one-to-one or something like that. So I'm happy to hear we'll be able to use some of that Brown School funding to do that. But I want to make sure we can also keep up with that moving forward, and that becomes part of our strategic plan as well.
So, Nan, just with this breakdown of K through 5 and then 6 through 8, can you just talk through how you implement that? Are they literally two separate implementation streams, or would you stagger them a bit?
I think we would implement it the same. So we would have professional development time set aside for all staff, K to 8, K to 6 or K to 5 would attend the PD with the vendor, and the remaining staff, the secondary staff, would go with the other vendor. All of the programs that we've been looking into, part of the cost is access to being professionally developed by the program. So we do have built into the fees, regardless of whether we pick one program or two, the part of that is being professionally developed. So it's about us finding the time for teachers and then supporting them in that work. But it wouldn't be that we'd have to stagger start times. Everybody would be expected to start with their new curriculum in the fall.
Emily, did you have any questions? All right, great. Thank you, Nan.
I have one more. Given where we are with what our staff has been under for the last year, and where we are with any potential funding, would we be able to implement and have enough time to implement the professional development to get everybody up to speed over the summer, to put this new program in, or whatever's left of this school year?
Yeah, it's not the best timing. I'll agree. I mean, it's going to be Dr. Oxford and I were talking about that recently, and we are going to set aside a block of time in early May with Rebecca Brand, and we're going to really try to lay out a professional development calendar for staff. So everybody will know when and what is happening for the year in terms of professional development. And a lot of professional development is in the classroom, in my experience. So it's one thing to have a vendor visit you and come and give you the overall, but it's almost equally important during those ongoing staff meetings that we provide dialogue for people to talk about it, to co-plan lessons, to look at materials. So it's not all it's minimal stand and deliver. It's more ongoing professional development with colleagues leaning into each other and helping each other navigate a new program. And that will be provided monthly, if not weekly.
Okay. So where we potentially won't have the funding to buy the program until July 1, and we want to implement at the beginning of the school year, would we be in a position that we'll need to stipend teachers to learn it before they have to teach it on day 1? Or how do we make that juxtaposition? Because we're not buying it until July 1. We don't have the funds until July 1 when the new fiscal year rolls out.
So I think I would defer to John and how he would like that. I don't play a big role in figuring out when things are purchased and in terms of timelines, but I do know in working with the union that we will have some professional development prior to the start of the year. And I will certainly be using some of our grant money to stipend teachers, as we were also talking about really targeting our lead teachers and asking that leading this work becomes one of the priorities in each school. And that small group I would expect to work with over the summer.
Now, I'm sorry, by the way, I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you. They're
No.
popping in my mind as you talk, and you're giving great information. So where we're looking at eliminating the lead teacher position at Village, and they'll have 2 potential math curriculums to roll out. I just want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success, and if we're pulling away that position, we've got, we have to replace it with something. I want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success, that we have the budget to pay for what you need to make this success for our teachers and for our students.
Yep. All really great considerations. And I think those are all kinds of things that we're already trying to project. So we're not planning in the moment, that we really are thoughtful and having these conversations well in advance, so that when time does present itself, we aren't trying to scramble and figure out what the agendas are going to be, that we already kind of have them sketched out. And I think also part of the conversations we have as a leadership team is about building the capacity of our building leaders to drive some of this work in schools. And so me and John working with our building leaders, helping them understand the content so that they can also serve as a resource to their teams and in classrooms.
Thank you so much. This is where curriculum coaches would be huge, right, Nan?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
So sorry, Nan, I have a question. You mentioned timing.
Yep.
And in my head, one thing that, and tying back to the assessment piece, so we know that this year has been different in terms of the education for our students. So and we've done some great assessments recently to kind of compare where they were last year at this time to where they are this year. Yeah. And then I guess my question is around being able to continue those assessments and really know the impact, if there is one, of this year at the same time that we're changing a curriculum. So then are we technically comparing apples to apples in that, from an assessment and student tracking standpoint?
Okay, great question. It depends on the assessment. So really, when you're looking at assessments and measuring student progress, you try to triangulate, which means you're using 3 different data sources. So then you're really getting a solid picture. So it wouldn't necessarily be, if we changed an assessment source, the online electronic assessment sources like Ames Web, which we're using now, or a new one, if we were to bring one on, they're standards based. So students are either meeting standards or below standards. And so the questioning is really, they're all kind of calibrated to measure a student's proficiency around a standard. But the important piece too is all the formative assessments that teachers are doing now. So they're doing teacher college, running records, they're doing all of that, and that won't change. Those data points won't change. So there'll be that familiarity for teachers and the understanding of what that means when they receive a new student from the grade before. So there'll be some material, some things that are very new and some things that are very familiar, but they'll all provide solid information. So I don't worry about, because we use one tool, it's kind of like getting, this is very, some people companies would resent me saying it, but it's like getting unleaded gas and premium plus gas. Your car runs the same, but the assessment tool, I'm saying that with assessment tools that are kind of online, that they're all measuring the standards. And so they ask different questions and maybe have better graphics and more engaging for kids, but they get to the same place.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Nan. Can we circle back to the 10th? Because I just wanted a little bit of an update, and I don't know if that would be you or Nan, just to kind of clarify, I think, some misunderstandings that are out there in the community.
Sure. Nan, would you field this and I'll fill in the blanks?
Sure. So when we were planning as a leadership team about coming back, there were a lot of big hurdles. And one of them was really around serving lunch, making sure kids are being able to spread out as much as possible when we're asking them to be within 6 feet of each other in very tight spaces at the elementary levels. And now we're doing the same at the secondary level. So over the course of the year, we've been hearing, or I've been interpreting messaging around, we as parents will do whatever we can, whatever you need. And so I thought this is something that we're all as leaders saying we need: space for kids to be outside, and we can use the spaces for lunches, and then we can use them for academic instructional spaces when they're not in use for lunches. And it's something that will be in every school. And so if I'm a kindergarten parent and I make a contribution, it's my student is going to benefit. And if I'm a high school student, I have a high school student and I make a contribution, my student is going to benefit. So it really was one of those opportunities where, regardless of where your child attended a school, you would be able to contribute to something that we feel is in the best interest of kids and teachers in getting kids back in person for full days of learning. So I guess I hadn't anticipated the questioning around the COVID funding. And for that, I apologize, because I feel like I may have put some things on your agendas that weren't previously placed there. I do know that over the year, being part of all those conversations, an exorbitant amount of our money, so much so that we don't have additional pieces of things in our curriculum budget and other places where you might think we would be able to benefit from money coming to the district. So I just kind of thought that was an opportunity for us as a community to provide some of those resources.
I would just say that, Nan, I don't think an apology is necessary at all, that this was an opportunity to take advantage of families that had said, just tell us what you need. And this was something across the district. And then maybe as you guys have gotten regular updates on COVID funding and where we're spending money and how those dollars are being allocated, to use the parent willingness to fund something, to put that money towards something that is a rental that would go away, but would be an immediate benefit, and then additional COVID dollars to be spent for something maybe more permanent. So I think that Muffy and Nan have done a great job, and I think they've raised over $10,000 already, true to what families have been saying, just tell us what you need. So this was a need, and I think it benefits children K to 12, as Nan said.
And just to clarify, there's no tie to us being able to open at full days to getting these tents. Like, one does not equal the other. We are opening at full days regardless of tents or no tents, correct?
That is
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Sarah, I see your hand is up.
Yes. So are the tents for through the end of the school year, Nan, or no? When we talked to Teacher and Learning, you were still like calling every tent place, I think,
Yeah.
in the tri-state area.
And I want you all to know that I was calling to try to get them made so that we could have something that stayed in the district. But because of the way the fabric that is used, they're flammable. And because of that, we are not allowed as a school department to purchase items that could potentially be dangerous. So I've tried all different kinds of angles. But Sarah, I've had to go back to the tent company and kind of say, I'm not sure our end date, because pending how much money we raise, we might have to return sooner rather than later. So I don't have an end date.
If we can fully fund it, are they available?
Yes, as of right now, but they aren't going to hold them because I really wanted to make sure we especially had them at the high school in the event we could use them for, outside evening activities for seniors or junior, a prom related event. I'm not sure, but at this
We could
point,
give those kids something. I think it would be
yeah.
like social emotional wise, I think it would be really super impactful.
I hesitate to commit not knowing how much money we're going to be able to raise. And the tent at the high school is the most obviously expensive. So it's a lot of money.
So I think this is a great example of where it's not just a binary choice, and that there are layers to all of this, that Nan becomes a tent expert who finds out that you can't have a particular type of tent because it doesn't have the correct fabric. And I think that it's easy to look at it and say, well, you just do that. But hopefully tonight, this clarification will really give a shot in the arm for the fundraising effort, because I do think they're important.
So to follow up on that, I know you were really thorough, but could we rent a container to store them in so they're not adjacent to a building if we were to purchase them, or no?
I actually called a company recommended by somebody in the community for the same reason, and they don't have the capacity right now. So many people are doing exactly what we're doing, that the local company I called about storing and are you talking about if we were to purchase something?
I'm thinking
take it from them.
We could potentially have this problem in the fall again. So my next question is, can we reserve them for the fall so that we really can purchase them? We own them, and then we have them for the fall. And I was thinking, for instance, we have containers that are storing our equipment, our PPE and our various stuff like that. Is there a capability to get one of those and store them, off site?
I can certainly ask Todd about that. I haven't gone down that, only because I didn't think we could purchase them and safely install. So I didn't even go into the
I only say that because I don't see this as a short-term issue. I see this as, a potentially longer-term issue, that these would be helpful in the fall and things like that. And if we can buy them, and then we'll, it's more initial cost, but shorter long-term cost. Plus we have them, and we're not like in July and August racing every other district to find them again. Michelle was waving her hand.
Hi, just want to add, I don't want to prolong the conversation. We did look at this option in the spring, and the trouble is we are not able to find tents for purchase with the proper fire rating required by the town bylaws. That is basically what it came down to. We tried to contract with the company out of New York, tried to contract with the company out of California. They were not able to provide the fire rating that was required by the town of Marblehead. In addition, we have to have the tent staked into the ground. We're not able to use weights. So that adds something else. So we have looked at it. If we do find a company that we can purchase tents, we will gladly purchase them. But we have come across this challenge since, April. We've been looking for them, and we have not been able to secure them.
Yeah, that's too bad. And I don't want to prolong it either more, but I know we've done it for clients. There are sprays that make things fireproof. I don't know if that would qualify, but I'm just looking for a long-term solution here if it's possible.
Absolutely.
But I'm getting too far in the weeds, so I want to move on. But like I said, like if we can solve our problem now and in the fall, then let's.
Well, we now have a great relationship with this one company that is on a procurement list that we're able to use, and they're wonderful. They're super responsive. They give us pretty much what we want. So we have built this great relationship with them, and they've been wonderful. So I'm sure we'll be able to get them back in the fall if needed.
Thank you, Michelle.
That actually completes the superintendent's report, which moves to Michelle.
All right, great. Thank you, Nan, as well.
Yep.
So Michelle, that leads us on to the financial part. I will deal with the schedule of bills first. That's first on the agenda. The schedules were in the Dropbox. So can I get a motion to approve the identified schedules of bills totaling $217,757.74?
So moved.
Sarah moved. Emily second. Any questions on any of that? All right, Sarah Gold, yes. Megan Taylor? Yes. Emily Barron? And Sarah Fox?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, that passes 4-0. All right, the Student Opportunity Act budget plan. I'm actually not sure if that's Michelle, you, or if Nan is involved in that as well.
Actually, that is Nan.
All right, Nan, take it away again. Oh, you're muted.
I hate it when people have to say that to me. Ugh. So initially the state had shared with us that we had to bring it to school committee. And then John got an email a couple of weeks ago saying that the school committee needed to vote on it. So I'm bringing it back to you. I will summarize very quickly. The sum of the funding coming from the Student Opportunity Act is $90,690. And $70,690 has been allocated to adding a position for a district math interventionist. Again, that position would work with primarily adults to unpack new curriculum and to remediate student gaps in instruction and help with offering training and professional development around tiered instruction. $10,000, Dr. Oxford and I are working on a summer literacy program that would target students with decoding and fluency deficits. And the final sum of $10,000 is going to be around professional development for our staff, using developing the skills around intervention in classrooms. So instead of looking to outside expertise in special education or in tutoring, in that we really look internal inside that core instructional block, and how do we provide multiple entry points for students based on skill and give them that opportunity for independent practice at their instructional level where they can then move to the next level. So there's a lot to learn about that. And the state it's a huge initiative across the country. It's called multi-tiered systems of support. And Dr. Oxford and I are partnering in bringing that thinking to Marblehead and wanting to be able to bring in some contractual vendors and maybe provide stipends for staff to do that work.
Megan?
So Nan, thanks for that. I have two questions. One is just administratively on the vote. Do we have to vote that this is how we're going to spend the money? Okay. So Nan, can you elaborate on the math interventionist? Is that just, would that just be a 1-year position as we kind of roll out this new math curriculum?
Hopefully not. This, and I'll lean into Michelle here. In my understanding, it's a 3-year commitment that the state is making to us with these funds, Michelle. Am I correct?
I believe so. I'm not 100% positive. I do know the first year is the 90,000.
Okay. So my understanding is it's going to, for 3 years, maintain at 90, if not increase a bit. So it would be at least at minimum, a 3-year commitment. And hopefully at that point, we'd be in a position to either see where the state funding fits, or maybe absorb the position into one of our title grants. But it would be specific to, we have the position provided by Rebecca Brand in the district, where she is offering coaching cycles to staff now, where she'll go in and model instruction, and then they'll debrief around a lesson, and then a teacher will pilot a lesson and she'll provide feedback, and they co-plan and look at student work together, and she'll drive some of those conversations at their professional planning blocks. We're looking to bring somebody in that can do that for math.
So, okay, so I wasn't aware that the SOA was confirmed for 3 years. Okay. All right. So this position will last as long as we can fund it.
Yep.
I actually don't, Michelle, I mean, is it confirmed? Or I mean, we was semi-confirmed last year and it disappeared. I don't think with state funding, anything's like confirmed.
The only thing that's confirmed, which is not set in stone, I mean, 100% is the 90,000 for the first year, which it looked like that is going forward at this time.
Yeah. So that actually brings up my question of, you know, then we're using one-time revenue to fund a reoccurring, what would ideally be a reoccurring position. And I am fundamentally usually opposed to that. It's as a way of balancing your finances. So that is a concern. And then my other question is, by the way, I support the role. It's the one-time funding for reoccurring operational costs, the piece that make me nervous. And then you talk about this being for the adoption of a new math program. We're not sure we are adopting a new math program. So would you still want this position, even if it wasn't to focus on implementing that new and aligning that new math curriculum?
Absolutely. So definitely teachers would benefit from the professional structure that this position will provide. But also, Sarah, the way that our title grants have been, Title I and Title II grants have been written in the past, I think if we are more strategic, we could fit this position as an ongoing position through those title grants. Which any title funded position is a risk for a person that signs on, knowing that that's how their position is funded, is through title grants. But that's just the nature of that cycle.
I mean, do we find ourselves with a $71,000 surplus in our title grants currently?
It's not a surplus at all. It's about really looking at what we want to focus on. And maybe instead of having a bunch of different things that we're spreading the money around on, is really prioritizing the funds for one particular thing.
We're like transferring funds from one area to another. Not, it'd still be under the title thing from payment.
Right.
And then I think on the budget priorities, this was listed as a curriculum coach. So I just want to be clear, this is not, a curriculum coach for all curriculum. This is a math curriculum coach. Is it for K through 12 or K through 8?
It would be K through 8. And this is a different position than the curriculum position that's posted as a budget priority.
Okay, so this is different.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, a big deficit in our district has been for a long time when we did away with those curriculum coaches and they never came back. It's an important position. It really, allows a lot of work to get done, as Nan obviously knows. So I'd like to see us support that in multi-disciplines. So I was just wondering if this was, just math in what grade levels. Thank you.
Well, I think, I'm absolutely in agreement that we don't want to use grants and that to fund recurring positions in a recurring way. But I do think, we set up a couple of years ago with the Bright program. That was a grant funded position. And then we prioritized it and we knew that we needed to prioritize it the coming year into the budget. And we did, and those two positions continue forward. So I think, I just kind of want to put that out there that sometimes it's a great way to sort of get something going, and then we can prioritize it within our operating budget the next year.
I would say.
Totally agree. If you recall, when we voted to bring in the Bright, at that point, we voted to make a commitment to funding it moving forward. So I would hope that we would do the same thing here, whether we receive this Student Opportunity Act or not, that we're not going to start something that we're not going to see through. I would hope we'd handle that the same way as the Bright program.
Well, the Bright program, it was a pilot program. to
Right.
see if it was successful and had benefit.
Yep.
And if it did, then we would look to continue to fund it. So if we're using this in the same way, are we piloting this role? Because we have to know that we might, next year it's a different committee, it's a different budget cycle. You can't commit to it right now.
And I think, with the Bright program, we kind of knew it was going to be successful. And it seems like we know that this is going to be helpful and create success. So I think just by this conversation that clearly it's and Nan, your support of this, that it's an important position that would really benefit the district as we move forward.
And don't take my comments as if I don't support this role. I 100% support this role, Dan. Absolutely. I think it's a need for sure. And we just want to make sure that we fund it in a responsible way.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's hard to make a case against.
Who needs math?
Well, and I think, we hear a lot, especially lately, around the curriculum piece. We've got a couple of curriculum priorities, the math program, the math curriculum, as well as curriculum support staff. So I think, that's a space in this district where there's a real need, and it's seen and it's being addressed. And, my hope is that it continues to move forward.
Okay.
All right, so we need a motion. So can I get a motion to approve the outlined plan for expenditure of the $90,690 from the Student Opportunity Act?
So moved.
Megan moved. Emily second. All right. All right, Sarah Gold, yes. Megan Taylor?
Yes.
Emily Barron?
Yes.
And Sarah Fox?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nan.
You're
All right,
welcome.
so that brings us to the FY22 budget update.
Yes. Would someone be able to put up the budget change form, the budget summary,
Usually successful.
or let me share my screen?
I will let you share your screen.
Even better. Thank you.
All right, you want to co-host? That's the easiest way I know how to do that.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you. Can you see the budget sheet on the screen now?
It just shrank.
Column A.
That's not good.
It was up there, and then now it's just a sliver. There you go.
Okay, not touching it. So for those of you that were at the joint budget meeting earlier this week or attended, this will be somewhat of a repeat. But I do want to start off by saying we are moving forward in our FY22 budget process. We are completely on track in terms of timeline and in terms of the process of where we should be. We also are, have gotten feedback from the finance committee and the town officials that are on that group where they're all happy where we are. So I just want to reiterate that we're not behind. We're just taking our time and doing our due diligence with this process at this point. So this sheet here, which was posted to Dropbox, I believe yesterday, has and this is the same sheet that I reviewed earlier this week on Tuesday morning. It has last year's budget, the FY21 budget of the $40,521,000. It has the payroll contractual costs of the $862,549. And then I summarized each of the budget categories. Basically, the first part of the sheet is what we are looking at really for a level service budget, or same services in real-time dollars. So we have a one-time appropriation for the Student Opportunity Act, which that is the exact program that Nan just discussed. So for next year, that total will be $90,690. So we do need to add that to our budget because it's actually being funded through the state's Chapter 70 program, which means the revenue is going to go to the town and be put into the general fund. So they need to appropriate it to us. The second or the third item on this sheet, the one below that, is just operating cost increases. Most of that cost actually represents special education tuitions. Our tuitions are not increasing, but our revenue source in the revolving fund is decreasing. So we need to add that to our operating budget, and the total of the operating cost increases total $573,629. We have new school operating costs of $77,000. This is strictly utilities. Normally we do have the utility reserve fund. However, the utilities at the Brown School will cause us to use more than our maximum allotment of the of the utility reserve fund. So we need to increase those budgets by $77,000. And then we have a bunch of cost decreases. And this is also broken out into a couple different areas. We have an operating cost decrease of $121,329. We have some staffing cost decreases, which actually total over $500,000. However, we do have to increase the unemployment budget because we are self-employed for unemployment claims. So anytime we do reduce some positions, there's always a potential that we are going to pay roughly 50% of that salary in unemployment costs. And then we have two other items, other possible staffing reductions that we've been tossing around, and savings due to known retirements. So the total of all those items net to $865,000. However, I do want to mention that our total operating cost increase is $1.6 million. That's in this yellow box to the right side. If we take out that contractual obligation cost, really our operating increase is $741,319, or 1.83%. Our total operational savings in this sheet is $738,494. And basically, before we get to the remaining budget priorities that I'll review on the bottom of the sheet, we have $287,865 to spend before we hit our target number. And that target number is something we've discussed. It's something that the town usually projects to us just based on our contractual obligations. It's not necessarily the number where we're going to land this year. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but that's the number that we are comparing our budget to at this point. So the second half of this sheet has items 9 through 23. These are budget requests in order of priority that the leadership had prioritized a couple weeks ago. We had the leadership team together and we had some great conversations over as a whole, what we really thought the budget priorities should be. And obviously the top priorities are the highest ones that the team thought we should be funding, and the bottom one was the lowest. Not by any means is it something we do not need. It's just something that made it to the bottom of the list when we really have to rate these items. So we have a whole bunch of items here. We have new positions for the Brown School of 2 teachers for preschool, 4 paraprofessionals. And we also have an increase in estimated preschool revenue due to those new classrooms. That total is $147,670. We have technology as the next item, item number 10 for Capital Leases. And originally it was 2 integration technology specialists. This number right now of $80,000 only includes 1 technology specialist. The leadership team did discuss that we could probably try this program with increasing the staff or adding 1 staff for the upcoming year. So that total increase is $292,706 in the area of technology. We also, the third priority, or number 11 on the list, would be central admin for an HR director of roughly $80,000 with savings of the HR assistant position. So the net cost would be roughly $30,000. Curriculum is the next item. We had 2 instructional specialists originally. The same thinking here with the leadership team. Maybe we could go for 1 next year and pilot it and see how that works. And then try for another one the following year if it's very successful. So this also only carries 1 salary at this time, and that's $80,000. And then the new math curriculum we've been tossing about and talking about at length, and the total is $180,000. The next item is village school. We have discussed eliminating teacher leader stipends at that location only, and that total would be the 44,000 in savings, but to create a guidance counselor position. The net increase would be 16,503. And then we just continue going down. You can read, and certainly this is also posted in the school committee. It should be on the agenda. If not, I will make sure it actually makes it up to the website as well. And we have Marblehead High School academic skills teacher, veterans, an additional reading teacher. Brown, we were talking about adding a custodian. Glover, 2 additional allied arts positions, totaling 1 full-time individual. It'd be a split position. Same thing at Village. Speaking of the Bright program at the high school, we were talking about changing the Bright tutor to an actual teaching position. That program has been extremely successful, and last year we did bring that into our operating budget. It was previously a grant. Increased position of director of guidance. We currently have a department head, but they were hoping to make that into a director position. Facilities, we were looking for some administrative support or additional administrative support and a groundskeeper position. And central admin, originally we were talking about a community relations liaison, and athletics was talking about the replacement of the scoreboard at the high school. The last item, number 23, was an additional fellows position to make this a total of 5 fellows in our program for Marblehead High School. We actually removed this request because we found out that Endicott College will not be able to provide us with any additional fellows next year. We'll actually be lucky if we can get all 4. So at this time, we removed that request because it's not something that can be funded. So with all of these items, and taking the 2 reductions of the 1 instructional technology position and the 1 curriculum specialist position and removing the fellow, we are down to a total budget request right now of $42,501,122. This certainly is not where we will end this discussion. These discussions are ongoing. We have another budget subcommittee meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, and I expect we will be talking about this in more detail and moving forward in this process.
Megan, and budget, do you want to weigh in on anything?
Well, John, do you have anything you want to add?
No, the conversations are ongoing. I check in regularly with Jason Silva to make sure that we're on target, on process where we should be. He continues to assure me that the process that we're following on the town side, they haven't certified the free cash, so we don't have that number at this point. I check in with Ben Berman regularly in Finance Committee. They were on the call on Tuesday. And so I think that, we will have continued conversations, and there'll be tiers of things where we might have to, draw a line, but we're not at that point right now.
So I guess just to kind of add some color for the rest of the committee from our
Good news, perhaps.
budget subcommittee meeting is, I feel like there's a lot of moving parts right now. Right? So as John mentioned, free cash hasn't been certified yet. We haven't officially got our appropriation number, which there's a whole host of reasons for that. That's no one's to blame. It's just the situation we're in, and typically that would have been kind of finalized a little while ago. And in addition, one of the things Jason mentioned on Tuesday is that because of the I don't even know what we're calling it now, American Recovery Act, that Biden and the government just passed, Marblehead's expecting some funds to come into the town for that. And so we had a discussion, that information has literally just been released, and, Jason and the town are waiting for confirmation on what that will look like. And then you'll have to figure out how does it make sense to kind of allocate that across the town. But that is a variable for our budget for sure. And, I think when John and Michelle talk about our ongoing conversations, that will be a piece of it. But one thing I would like to see us do, because we do have a set of priorities here, I would really like to see us get to the point where we can tier those out. So here are the top, whatever number they are, that we're going to fund, and we're going to figure out how to fund them. That's tier one. And I think, we've talked about these enough at this point, and I think in the meeting with the town, it was really kind of those top 5, I think. But then tier 2 is, other things that we, want to fund, but I don't want to say they're only wants, but they're tier 2. And then the tier 3 things, which are ones that, if we can fund them, great. And if we can't, it's not gonna have an impact right now. So I would like to see us get to that point from a committee standpoint, just so we're all on the same page. But I think there are just a number of moving parts here, and we have to just, acknowledge that piece.
But I think that's budgeting. And I'm not hearing anyone, particularly Michelle, saying, wow, we're way off, John. We need to be panicked. I'm not hearing that from Jason saying your number is ridiculous. You need to pare that down. It is an iterative process. And I would just caution that we're not looking back and saying, well, this wasn't a priority. It should have been a priority. Each administrator presented to the committee their budget that was needs-based. And the time for pushback on that was during those workshops. And so now that we've gotten to this stage of the process, I don't want to say, well, why wasn't this added to the budget?
Yeah, I agree with that. For sure. And yeah, I think that's a great point. And Michelle already said it, like we're kind of following the same timeline and we're good where we're at. But there are still, not everything's finalized at this point, and that's okay. And we'll continue to work with the town. I think we're in, those conversations were positive as always, and I think we're all kind of working towards the same goal. So,
Sarah, anybody hand up?
Yes. So I actually just want to point out that when we had those budget workshops where the administrative team presented, I did start to try to dig in, and I actually was told at that point that this wasn't the appropriate time to dig in, that would come later. This was for them to present, we'd digest, and we'd come back. So to say now that was our time is inappropriate. So I want to make sure that we understand that the budget by Massachusetts state law is the purview of the school committee, and we can ask for clarifications at any given time. So I want to, do that. But then just to clarify on this budget adjustment tracking sheet, are we currently at a delta from the historical way we find our town number? I know that needs to be clarified. We are in a unique situation. Free cash is typically certified in the fall in October or November. So we are definitely in a very unique situation that it hasn't been certified yet. But am I correct in that our delta, if that number follows the same path as history has shown, of 826,604?
Correct. With those few changes that we made, yes.
Okay.
That's
And then to clarify what Megan said, you were saying with the tiered system, you were saying items 1 through 5 would be like in a tier 1, and then the ones below that line would be a tier 2 and possibly into a tier 3?
We haven't designated which specific items are, but that's where we're thinking,
Okay. No, I'm just actually,
Yes.
Megan, that's what you said, right?
that was a suggestion.
Okay. So we're saying a math curriculum is a tier 2?
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying at all.
Well, I mean, it's below item 5. It's
Sorry,
No,
I wasn't applying the numbers on Michelle's spreadsheet, but
Okay.
the priorities.
No,
basically.
yeah, because this first sheet is all stuff that is absolutes.
well, yeah, the first 5 are absolutes. That's why I think
Well,
she
no,
said-
the first eight on here. We're talking about the budget request in order of priority. So
I
the
understand
priorities,
that, but 6, 7, and 8, Sarah, aren't budget requests or reductions.
Okay, 9 through 13, Sarah. But again, just as an example. Just as an example. Because I was making the suggestion as an example. Yes, 9 through 13.
that
Okay.
designation has not been made yet.
Okay.
Yes.
and has there been any communication from the town at all on sort of any of that? Okay. Sorry, I interrupted, Sarah.
Can you, in where we see the remaining for FY2 22 priorities is 287,865. Are you saying once we take our town allocated number, our estimated town allocated number, we put in our contractual obligations, that's your delta of
Yes.
like what we could apply to new things? Okay.
Correct.
But even with that, we're still at the 826 delta.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that's really good clarification. And then
Sorry, Sarah. Can I just clarify on that though? That we would apply that 287 to the 826.
no, the 826 is after the 287.
Yeah, the total of all the budget priorities after the basic, operating costs, total 1.1 million. So items 9 through 23 total $1,114,748. So when we take out that 287, the delta is the 826. 604.
Okay.
So in other words, sorry, Sarah, just to continue to clarify that, $287 some odd $1,000 can be funded out of these priorities at this point. Okay.
Correct.
Sorry, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yes.
And that's starting at line 1.
No, it's starting at line 9.
Item 9.
Okay. So if we were to fund all these priorities, we're at 826,604 deficit from where our projection would likely be.
Correct.
Okay. I think that there's a lot of numbers going around and that's hard.
Under past practice, yes, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Right.
While we're on this, I'd like to, bring up I'd like us to have a discussion, whether it's at the next meeting or now, but how we handle our budget hearing. I've done some research. I've talked to other school committees. I've looked at how we've done it in the past. I pulled minutes. I've been at, probably the last 5 or so. And talked to past school committee members as well as MASC. And I think we really need to iron out how we're going to handle this, because last year we spent, several minutes of our budget hearing discussing if we would answer questions from the public, if we would interact with the public. So I'd like that ironed out before we go into the budget hearing, because there was what we've done in the past, and then the deeper past, and then what the other town boards do. And then there was what we did last year. So I just want to put that on an agenda if we can, and have that really ironed out clearly ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been talking to Dorothy Presser about that. So we can do
I
that.
talked to Dorothy the other day and had a really good conversation about it too.
Anything else, Megan?
Well, yeah, a couple things. One is, I think we have gotten a few emails, and there's obviously been questions at public comment, both in the budget subcommittee meetings and in our own meetings. And I feel like the budget process, it took me a little time to get ramped up. I'm sure, Emily, you're getting ramped up too. And I think for the community, it's even harder because, they're not necessarily, they're only getting information from these meetings. And I wonder if it would be useful to do like an FAQ for things. So questions that we're getting from the public, or things that we hear pop up, or, just things that we're working through. If it's worthwhile to kind of put that FAQ together, similar to what we did for the reopening, post it out on our websites, and some of the things we'll cover here, but maybe not everything, but it's just a reference point for the community who is trying to pay attention. I'd like to get that up prior to our budget hearing. Maybe we can set the scene. Maybe we can talk about this next week or next meeting, but set the scene before we kind of dive right into the budget at the public hearing too, but really just to help kind of clarify some things for the community before we get into our public hearing. I just wonder if that would be helpful.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
That's for sure. I think it's needed that people want the information and they're not quite sure what our process is. And I think it would be beneficial for the community, us to even refresher for those of us who aren't on the budget subcommittee, just to know how it all works.
And then to speak real quick on the town potential money coming in from the new round of, COVID relief funding, I want to be cautious. I mean, extra money for the town is great. And anything that could help us with those things is welcome and wonderful. But I want to be cautious about being too optimistic that the fact that, again, a one-time revenue is what we potentially are relying on for what I see as a structural deficit in our operating budget. And at some point, we need to fix that structural deficit, because this reliance or this, hallelujah, we have another one of these one-time revenues isn't good budget planning.
I don't think anybody has ever disagreed that there's a structural deficit. I think it's sort of the knowledge that goes underneath that so that we're prepared. I think 2 years ago, when everything was so chaotic, one of the things I said was, I know that we need money, I just can't tell you where we need it. And so we've been digging away and digging away and digging away at that for the past 2 years. And there's been, COVID certainly threw some curveballs in there. And, but I think that there's been a lot of great work. And I think the conversation about all of the curriculum pieces is evidence of that. And I think it goes much deeper, and that work is ongoing.
So one thing just to add on to that, Sarah, is, I agree. I think I said the same thing. Like, we all agree that we need to get to that point, but we need to have a plan and numbers attached to that plan before you make any kind of ask. And we've talked a lot this year about the strategic plan and how that ties into that process. So I guess for me, it's kind of getting that process underway. I'm not saying we have to develop a strategic plan in the next 2 weeks, but I would like to kick that process off like sooner rather than later, and starting with kind of looking at what the, not people, but roles of that, what that committee is going to look like, and start formulating kind of that high level timeline too, so that we can really get that underway. I mean, it's one of our initiatives goals for this year. We're coming up on April, so I would really like to see us on that, because we want to get that done so that we can use the fall to do what we need to do.
No, I completely agree. I was actually talking with John just the other day about, as we were planning this meeting, looking at our April meetings and hoping to put that process out there, hopefully that first meeting in April, to really, get it out there, get the plan out there, and then, what those dates are and everything, like, just like you said, the committee makeup and stuff, and so that we can roll that out and just really be prepared so that we're ready to hit the ground running on it.
That's something we can kind of get on the agenda for that April.
Yep, hopefully that April 1st. Yeah, that's the plan right now.
Just for clarification, I'm a little taken back right now, to be perfectly honest. My understanding was that this was a goal John had been working on, was the strategic plan. And I'm hoping what you're talking about in April is bringing that plan forward for us to talk about and kind of start to dig deeper into, not to start developing one, because this isn't, I mean, if we knew, if there was a statement at some point, over the summer or in the fall that we weren't prepared to go for an override because we felt we really needed a deep strategic plan, and that's what we were going to use this year for, and we're talking about it in April. I hope I'm not misunderstanding that, and that it's more that we're presenting what we've thought, what has been developed in April, and digging in deeper, because if not, we have another discussion at hand.
That was never part of the conversation. The conversation with Dorothy Presser in our meeting about this was just that in a normal year, it would have taken place throughout the year, and we would be having a conversation about what it is at this point. But given the pandemic, that work, that this fall was completely consumed with reopening, and that this would be a situation that would go forward in the spring and in the summer to finalize.
And the goals,
so was it not a goal on John's goals that it was going to get done this year?
So I think the disconnect is the entry plan for the superintendent, which I've been working on, and the strategic plan, which are two different, because the strategic plan would have community representation and be a facilitated process that you would work on mission and vision and your strategic goals, which would all have budget implications for them. So the entry plan I've been working on. The strategic plan is what you're asking to be launched, and that's the conversation we were having this.
Right, the strategic plan, I believe, is on the school committee's goals.
Right, our school committee goals had us kind of getting this underway.
Yep.
We probably said, if I remember correctly, May timeframe, but I would like to push that up a bit.
Yeah, I'd have to go back.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, we're behind the ball. This needs to, if we're hoping to be ready next year for an override, this really needs to be something that we really need to pick up and run with.
Well, I don't think that no work has been done. Like, I think that, there's a lot of work being done on all of these pieces all the time. It just needs to come together in a cohesive plan, and it needs the community involvement with it. Like that, it needs to be formalized. So, I guess I'm not understanding where the disconnect is on that. So
that makes two of us.
well, it was in a meeting that we had. There's been many conversations about this, and we went back and forth on it, and we vetted these things out and then came back and picked them as goals. So I guess I'm just confused. All right, thank you, Michelle. That leads us on to school committee discussion items. So I added on there tonight, and the MASS position paper was in our Dropbox. So the Massachusetts Association of the School Superintendents, and then they wrote a position paper. I was talking a little bit about this with Dorothy earlier today. She had thought that MASC had written it with it, but I couldn't really find that. I think that MASC is in support of it. It's a position paper on not going through with MCAS this year. And it was lengthy, but really thorough. And I think the piece that stuck out to me and why I really wanted to bring it forward to the committee this evening is because it talks about the social emotional aspect of MCAS and the fact that, our students haven't been in buildings as much as they normally would have been. And now the push is to get them back in buildings, and the emphasis is on social emotional health. So to bring in the MCAS is of concern. And so we've got these two entities that we, all of us rely heavily upon, saying they have significant concerns over this. Obviously there's a lot of politics involved at the state level, as well as there would have to be a federal waiver. But I believe the push was kind of to have school committees and superintendents reach out to their local state leaders and state government leaders and kind of petition for this, because I believe that's where this would sort of need to come from as well. So I wanted to bring it forward to the committee for a discussion tonight. I know we've had an MCAS conversation earlier this fall, and we decided not to move forward on it, but given our bit of a pivot from a focus on being all about catching kids up with curriculum to really looking heavily at that social emotional aspect of having kids in school, I thought it warranted bringing it back onto the agenda, particularly given this new position paper.
So just so I'm clear on the direction of the conversation, is it for us to take action as a school committee?
It can. It kind of depends on what the will of the committee is. So if we each individually wanted to reach out to our congressmen and senators, we could do that, or I could do that as chair, and John can do that as superintendent. It's sort of that I could not get a solid directional on what the position paper was sort of directing groups like us to do. But I just thought it was important enough, especially given the direction that our district has stated we're going, to bring it to the committee and have a conversation.
So not to put anybody on the spot, John and Nan, but we did talk about this at length, I think in December maybe. I guess I'm just wondering if those thoughts have, or those positions have changed at all, because things change on a pretty quickly right now in the environment we're in. So does your kind of stance or position on that change at all?
Nan?
So I guess if we don't have MCAS, it means we don't have a certain layer of information. So does that mean we can get it other ways? Yeah, we can think about how else we want to create assessments and maybe look internally as a district of what we can do differently to try to get some baseline data for our teachers in the fall. Because being able to identify where deficits lie is important. So that's one piece of information that we won't have to start those conversations in the fall. Does that mean we can't have really rich conversations about kids and where they are academically? No, we can. We did it before MCAS, and we can do it without MCAS. It's just a data point. And I know that the state has made concessions. I know they have reduced the amount of time the test is dramatically. I think it's a one session, where in the past ELA in third grade, or may have been three, or fourth grade was 3 sessions, 2 reading and a writing, and they've reduced it to 1 session. So I know there are considerations like that. So I guess I don't know enough about what it's going to look like for this spring for kids to be able to really be adamant one way or another. Just realizing though that it does give us information, and it is used by staff to kind of assess their own instruction and kids, both as cohorts of students and individual students.
So I think Nan has made the case clearly for and against, because it is a data point, and historically people that have been opposed to MCAS have said that the information we're testing in the spring, and then we don't get the results until the fall. So the information is not as valuable as it could be. But since things have been so up in the air this year, it would be a valuable data point against the standards at each grade level in ELA, mathematics, and then science at the high school. So it takes away valuable instructional time. But since we're going more in person, maybe that's mitigated by this. I do appreciate the fact that Mass issued a position paper on this, because I think they made the points why to maybe take a pass this year is valuable. But on the other side, in the absence of an assessment system against the standards, this would be a very valuable data.
I guess the question that I would have, and Nan, maybe back to you, is how reliable is this data going to be should we get it? Because if the test is being substantially changed, and we know that there's going to be additional stress, we know that our kids are stressed to the max as it is, and that these tests create additional layers of stress. So it'd be even more taxing. What's confounding about that data, and how much of a benefit, and I know you don't have these numbers, but might you think it actually would result in?
So I think a better group of people to ask would be your teachers, because what they do is they look at the standards in a year that's been interrupted like this one. They would look at the standards that they know they've really spent a lot of time on and really honed in on, and we call them the power standards. And so they would look at those and then see, how did the kids do? They did better than we thought, not great, not as well as they thought. They aren't able to identify certain characteristics. Well, that makes sense because we didn't really teach that. So if I was getting that information as a 4th grade teacher about a 3rd grade cohort, I would be able to see, okay, there are some real strengths and standards, and I'm gonna maybe lean off those because I know they've got those, and I'm gonna introduce some of the standards that didn't get covered well last year because of time and interruption. So it's just a gateway to kind of, enter into what your instructional plan is going to be. But also important in that is how we as a Marblehead community present MCAS to kids and to parents. It's just another day for kids is what I would tell my staff as principal, that kids should just come and show what they know. Like it's the more pressure we put on students to excel on these standardized tests, the more anxiety provoking they are and more resentful they are of having to take them. But it really, and for teachers too, we get that data is not going to look like it's looked in the past. We get that. And that's totally understandable. And that we would just want this data to be used internally, and to be used to guide instruction, not to critique teaching, not to rank teachers. It's not connected to any sort of evaluation. So I think there's a culture piece that people miss in talking about standardized testing. And I've always been a proponent of, you just come and show up, and it's just, your day looks a little bit different. It's a little out of whack schedule wise, but just show what you know, and then, we'll get you outside for a little extra recess or whatever. So there's other approaches to how standardized testing goes on in a district.
Sarah?
So one of my concerns, where I think the point about data points is very valid, especially where, you want to figure out what they might have grasped really well from the year before and what you want to review. However, these test results typically come out, the first week of November, correct?
They've been coming out sooner, Sarah, to schools.
Okay.
So they get dropped in what we call a Dropbox for staff purposes. Parents get them much later.
Yeah, no, I'm going from when we get them brought to us
Yeah.
at the SOCs.
Yeah.
So that was a concern. Do they have them in time to really, that those first few weeks in September really is when we're doing that, where are we reviewing? Is it realistic they'll have that data point? And then my next question is, whenever we change our format of whether we're going from the park to the MCAS or the MCAS 2 or the new whatever the version is, they say your first year really isn't a valid data point because you need something to compare it to. So this year is kind of an odd data point. We had no data point last year. And then at least I know at the third grade, the year prior was the first year of that new format and the kids taking it online. So they told us, don't really use this data point because that's new. So what are we comparing it to? I mean, where does this become an effective data point for this year? And what is our cost benefit ratio of, as Sarah says, any possible additional stress? Although I agree with you, Nan, I really think it's all about the marketing of it in a lot of ways. But I just want to make sure that we're doing this for valid data points. And then the MASS paper I thought was really good, where they didn't say, let's not do this. They said, we'll support this, or at least that's how I read it, but with these few tweaks. And, some of it was that it not be at every grade level. Some of it was that it accommodate remote learners. And there's different points, but, I don't think it needs to be an all or none.
So I think just to address your what data does it give? It provides a starting point for measurement for growth. So the growth with every year except for third grade, students get a growth percentile. So you're able to look at the growth percentile to see how much growth a student makes independently from one year to another. And so that is an important piece. But you're right, we wouldn't have it for our fourth graders this year because we didn't take it last year. So we would be behind in terms of looking. But if we took it this year and it was implemented again next year, there would be an indicator of growth that you would get on your own student, your own child.
And you'd be comfortable comparing this year's test study to next year's, even though this year's is going to be pretty drastically changed, where it's one day and things like that. Would they be comparable subsets?
To my understanding, I'm not a data person, but I do know that with the questions, there's a lot of statistics that goes into the wording and how that all kind of gets figured out, so that they're asking questions in a way that they are an indicator of growth.
Okay. Nan, I know I've hammered you with a million questions, but you've hit a great answer for all of them tonight. I'm really sorry, but
No,
a great support about this all. Thank you.
yeah, it's great.
Do either of you have any questions, thoughts?
I go back and forth about it. I don't know. I wish I had a more like a concrete, like someone saying, yes, we have to do it. And then I could, but yeah, I'm confused as what we should do. Because I see both sides just as important. So.
I agree. I think I totally value the points Nan made. And I think especially at the beginning of the year, kind of giving teachers some tools to help figure out, how they might have to modify their curriculum as a result of this year, especially. I think there's value to that. I just, all the points you raised too, is it in the best interest of the time we have with the students in the classroom and the impact to them? I mean, I guess I would kind of agree with the position paper that maybe, if there are certain tweaks that make it more reasonable, I think I'd support that. Obviously, MASS has kind of done their research and their due diligence, and I appreciate the information that they've provided and the thought they've put into it. So, I'd probably lean toward their recommendation, to be honest, if I had to decide right now. But I don't know. I guess that was my question at the beginning of the conversation. Are we just trying to decide if we're going to send a letter or what? Like, what's the action?
So I guess, Emily, did you want to?
Can I just make one other point?
Yeah.
So I think Nan made an excellent point about the culture of MCAS in our district and how we need to change that also. I know that's not it goes on along with this conversation, but we make it such a big deal, I think, that also impacts our decision making. So that's something that the district we probably should work on, even as parents, as everybody.
Yeah, and I guess Nan, that's one of my concerns as I'm thinking about what you're saying. Is I completely agree that it should just be another day. It'd be great to get to that type of a culture. That's not where we're at right now. I don't know. I don't know what our current sixth graders think of MCAS, but I know when my eldest was in sixth grade, he knew very well that was going to be a factor in his math placement, and he was very invested in being in the the accelerated track, and so that was a piece for him. And so, he's not alone in that, and I know our high schoolers are really focused on it and that they put a lot on it. So, I guess I just keep coming back to the social emotional piece this year. I'll say where I stand. I would like to write our state senator and state representative and support the MASS position paper. I'd be willing to go further, but for me, I think that's where I keep coming back to the social emotional and the additional stress for our students, and they'll make it through it. They'll be fine. And, us supporting this and telling our state reps this, may not change a thing, and we may end up with MCAS. But just, in the spirit of what can we do to advocate for our students, I think for right now, where we're at in this moment in time, that I would like to prioritize the social emotional over the data points. I think our teachers have done an amazing job, and that, I have no reason to believe that they're not going to continue to do that as we push into the future. Just sort of getting to know their students and knowing where they're at.
So what was presented to us is both an MASC and an MASS position papers. I'd like to hear from John on where you sit with the MASS notes, and do you support this, and do you recommend it to us in, as our superintendent, kind of, if you could just give us a little bit of where you stand.
Sure. Yeah, I fully support the MASS. I'm part of the conversation. They send out surveys to superintendents about your thinking on things like this. And I agree that it has been a year like no other. It causes anxiety for teachers that the results of this, even though DESE promises that, it will be used in teacher evaluation, that teachers take the results of these personally. And that's what good teachers do. And I think the time out of the classroom for testing would be better spent in focusing on the social emotional. So I would encourage the committee to support the MASS.
I can support that.
Okay. Sarah, does that sound good with you too? That I can write up something and put it out to you guys before I send it, just to be in basic support of the MASS position paper that was in the packet tonight.
Yeah, so just I guess get that out to us to review, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. I can do that. All right, thanks guys. Thank you, Nan.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, we've got a review of the policies. So Emily and I met the other day on Monday, and we reviewed a set of policies. The only one that we came back with changing this time around is the one on public comment. Obviously, public comment has been, and it always has been, but particularly this year has been a hot topic. So I wanted to go back to it and really make sure that our policy was as it should be, kind of in best practice. So I talked with Dorothy Presser about it last week, and she said that the current one that we have currently on the books looked good. The only thing that she had in addition to is this piece that occurs in red, and it was about sort of criticisms that can be lodged during public comment, and that they shouldn't take on any kind of a tone towards a teacher or it's definitely not a student, and that they should kind of stay within the scope of the school committee's authority. That being said, they can criticize the school committee and they can criticize the superintendent. And no one member of the school committee should be picked out because we do govern as a group, but that the school committee as a whole can be criticized in public comment. So that was her one critique on our current one. So when Emily and I and John were looking at this, we pulled up the MASC policy and took that number 3 and changed it out. I will say that I think as I was doing these edits the other day, there is, I think it's in number 6, I'm sorry. Number 6 basically is redundant, and we didn't catch that at the subcommittee level. So I would actually like to suggest right now that we remove number 6 and then add the last sentence there, under most circumstances, administrative channels are the proper means for disposition of legitimate complaints involving staff members. Add that into number 3. And then Dorothy and I also discussed this piece about how public comment functions. And we see different boards in town structure it different ways. And Dorothy and the MASC policy absolutely, supported that it's not a time for dialogue between community members. It's not a debate, a discussion. So I talked with her about some of the situations that we found ourselves in this year. And she did provide a little bit of nuance, which I thought was helpful. And so that's in number 8, that's where the addition is that obviously it can be taken offline and that it can be asked to be put into writing so that it can be addressed later on outside of a meeting so that we can be prepared. She said, I gave her the situation from last Thursday when there was a clear lack of understanding about a subject that had been discussed, so that we could just clear that up right there and then and not let any kind of confusion move forward. And she said, yes, that would be appropriate, but that a back and forth is not, and that's not best practice. So that's what you see added in red on number 8.
So what I would ask that we look at possibly is where it says, however, the committee can address questions as they are deemed appropriate by the chair, if we make that, or by majority vote of the committee.
Okay. What do you
Because
guys
I think
thought?
that as it stands in Robert's rules right now anyway, so if we just make that clear there, it would be
Okay.
helpful.
All right, so that's the change in number 8, and then the change in number 6. Is everybody okay with the change that I suggested in number 6 as well?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just noting what the changes that we made so I can go back.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if it makes sense to put it in the policy, but I think one of the things is if there's themes or actions that come out of it, just that we kind of identify that, like, okay, yes, and I don't know that we've had an example in recent public comment, but just thinking kind of, in my time on the committee over the past 3 years, sometimes you do want to take an action out of it, right? So you do want to be like, okay, John, can you follow up with, person A on that piece? So just, sometimes there does need to be an action that comes out of it, or, we get themes on a topic, and yes, we don't want to get into a dialogue with every person, and there may be 5 people who say the same thing, but we can say, okay, we're kind of sensing that this is a theme, and whatever we're going to do with it, we're going to address it tonight, we're going to follow up. I don't know. I just feel like that, I don't know how we add that in here, but that's just one thing that I think maybe how we handle those, clarifying how we handle those would be useful.
I think in some ways that falls under just the way we kind of operate and govern and do our job, because I'll give the example of if we have 10 public comments that say something like, I don't know, I'd like the calendar revisited, then it's incumbent on us as school committee members in the body of the meeting not to address, John Smith and Betty Sue, who made those comments, but to say, we've heard from our community, this is an important topic, and I would motion that we set up a subcommittee. You know what I mean? So it's incumbent on us to address their issues, not directly to them, but in the ways we govern.
Yeah, I'm just looking for, got too many pieces of paper that I write things down on, because I know there was a piece that Dorothy and I talked about similar to being able to address a question where, we're not inhibited from saying, something similar to that, of like, okay, let's, that sounds like a matter that John, that is under the superintendent's purview. John, can you go back to that? We can add it as an agenda item at a different meeting. So I think, whereas it seemed in the past that it's very much just, yes, ma'am, thank you, next, that there is that small amount of wiggle to address and kind of say, okay, thank you, we've heard that, we can't address it at this time, but let's email offline, or let's look at this on an agenda at a separate meeting and bring it, calendar, share the calendar comment, so that we can look at it and take action as a school committee.
Yeah, I think for me, thinking about if I put my, thinking about when I did sit in the audience, it is kind of awkward sometimes. And it's awkward for us
Absolutely.
too, right?
Yep.
Because someone says something like, yes, thank you very much. Like that's awkward.
Yeah.
So I think if we can add some flexibility for us, so that we can take action if we need to, but also so the community feels like they're actually heard, not, just that we hear what they're saying, but they're heard and we're going to do something. So yeah, I think adding these, clarifying those bits.
Yep.
We just add However, the committee can address questions and comments as they deem appropriate by the chair and by a majority vote. Just to add that, that way we can address a group of comments.
How about we put, instead of comments, how about themes?
Themes.
Would that work?
Yeah, and I don't know that we need to wordsmith it here, but I just think, if you guys meet again and we can tweak it a little bit.
Or I think,
Or
well, I
does that
think,
slow down the process?
no, I think, I think how I understand the process, this is our second reading. Emily and I did the read, and now we're back, we're presenting it to the full committee for the first read, and then the full committee can kind of weigh in, which is what we're doing now. And then next meeting, this will come back for the vote, assuming that there aren't any other massive changes or issues with it.
I worry that with some of this wordsmithing that's going on right now, that we're actually getting away from policy, which this is a policy and policy is what we do, and getting more on, what's good practice of, any elected official. So I just want to be clear that like we keep the policy, and then, that might be operating protocols or things like that, but that there's clearly a delineation, and I worry we're getting a little into the weeds with this right now.
Well, we've given you our comments.
Okay.
You guys can adjust as you feel necessary.
All right.
But I'm glad we're addressing it.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. All right, so I will make those changes and get back to you, and I may reach out to Dorothy another time just to sort of run some of these changes past her and the conversation from tonight. All right, thanks everyone. So that leads us to subcommittee and liaison updates. Well, we just did policy, so and we have budget already. Facilities.
So we're waiting with bated breath. I would think that timeline wise, it should be within a week or so. And then as soon as we have it in hand, we're ready to schedule a meeting and start digging in, but we really just need that assessment.
So I guess I just have a little bit of a concern with facilities at this point, because we've had some massive facilities stuff go on in the past month, and it's ongoing. And so I just have some concerns that facilities isn't meeting.
What massive facilities things have we had?
The move to with a lot of desks and moving classrooms and putting
that's not actually like what we don't actually get into that at the facilities. It's more like operating systems, like structure of a building, like that's more like furnishings and equipment. And that's not something like we don't get into that piece. That's operational for our administrators to be
right. But when we're talking about purchasing desks and new equipment for people, like there's budget implications with that, and there's we're talking about additional PPE for older students and for teachers. I don't know. I mean, obviously budget has heard a lot of COVID stuff. Policy has done some COVID policies. So I'm happy to talk about it. It's just not something that facilities has ever actually done. We've never been through a pandemic.
I think this year is a different year because there are such major shifts happening that I would think because we had facilities as part of the reopening,
right?
We had a facilities subcommittee as part of or I don't know if subcommittee is the right word, but subgroup as part of reopening. And I just feel like, especially now that we're making kind of a big shift to getting our kids back in school, which is something that we've been working on all year, that there is kind of a facilities piece of that is above and beyond normal operating procedure, normal operating process.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm going to want to run this, I'll reach out to Dorothy tomorrow because this feels more operational, which is not the purview of the school committee, but I'm perfectly happy to talk about it. It's just not something that, I don't know that we should be micromanaging John and Todd on their team on, purchasing desks if they need it. But if they want us to discuss it prior to that happening, then that's absolutely fine.
I guess I just see it, I don't see it as a micromanaging thing. I guess I see it as an understanding piece of, what's going on, what can be reported back. Some of this comes up in reopening, but I guess I just feel like there's quite a bit of facility stuff here.
Yeah. And I guess we have varying views of what would come under facilities management.
Well, Todd gives us an update every meeting on, how many MERV filters we have or how many he has to get and what the.
Yeah, and that's like our, those are our operational systems, like HVAC and
So
things like
that's what
that.
I think.
Not FF, certainly.
Right, but I think that's what Sarah's getting at, like because,
Yeah.
what's happening as in our facilities under, like, I think that's what she's asking.
As a result of our reopening plans.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I mean, if this is a direction you'd like us to take, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think, it's just kind of school committee eyes and, oversight. Okay, so I think there's a Metco update.
We have a lot of Metco updates. The first one is that I think we talked about this before, but our high school students have been going full day for a while now, but this was the first week that K-8 has started going for the whole day, which has been, I think, successful and has really helped them because they are a group of our students who have really struggled during the last year and the pandemic and everything. And it's been our MECO director, Heidi, was just saying to me how difficult it's been for them, but having them back in the building and here in district for the full day has been such a positive for them. So I just wanted to tell everyone about that. And the next thing is that we are starting a Friends of the MECO program, and we're going to kick it off next week where we support. It's going to be funds that we will raise to support the Tyrone Bumper Scholarship, which we have at the high school that gives a scholarship to a MECO student and a Marblehead student. They write an essay and it gets chosen. So we do have money in the funds, but it gets spent every year. So we're just going to try to, create money to fund that scholarship every year, plus any other MECO initiatives that we have at the district. So that's really exciting. So that'll kick off. I think we have our first real meeting about that next week. The other big thing that's happening is through MECO Inc. We applied to be a part of the RIDES program, which Lindsay Page at the high school sent an application and we got accepted. And the RIDES program, it stands for Reimagining Integration, Diverse, and Equitable Schools. So we've created this equity team that will follow the RIDES cycle to figure out as a district what we want to do, create a plan in regards to equity and inclusion, and take us through the cycle to get the plan established and how we're going to actually implement the plan. So it's really exciting. It goes through November. We meet many, many hours as a group to actually get to know each other, but then get to know what the district needs in this work. And it's really great. And the team is Nan is on the team, Lindsay Page, Emily Dean, Julia Ferreira, and Heidi Harris. And I just want to thank them for participating in this and wanting to do this work for our district, because it's a huge amount of time and it's amazing, and it's an amazing group of people. So thank you to all of you for spending all that time. Yeah, so it's great stuff that's happening.
Yeah, lots of great stuff.
I love that program. I think that sounds great at some point to get, maybe a little bit more, and probably you have to get into it a little bit, but presentation from that group to the school committee at some point. And I think so the timeline is good with it kind of coming to fruition in the fall, because that can tie very nicely into strategic planning, budgeting, so that it's, we can fund any pieces of it that we need to as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about it, but I'm glad that we're kicking that off.
We'll let everybody know that we can present.
Can you talk to me a little bit, or to us, about the Friends of the Metco. How is that structured?
So it's very in the works. It was an idea that we came up with when we were talking about the cultural fair in May. And then what else can we do? And we need a way to get, because this scholarship has been around for a while and we want to keep doing it. And so how do we keep funding the scholarship? And I think, I forget how the money's been. I think maybe they've fundraised for it before. I'm not exactly sure, but this is what we came up with as a way to keep funding it, asking people to donate, and I'll let you know what we decide, how we're going to go about that.
No, that's fine. What's the date again for the Cultural Fest? Can you email it to us?
Yeah, I know it's in May.
May 14th,
Yeah,
May
that's
14th.
I believe.
Put that in my calendar. I know
Yeah.
you mentioned it last time.
Keep plugging that.
Yeah, I'll keep, next time I'll write down the date too, so I remember.
Great.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
That's very,
Yeah.
very. Any CPAC?
I should have a CPAC update. I will have one for our next.
Perfect. Sounds good.
They are doing good work. I know that.
Great. Always, yep. All right, that leads us to the building project updates. I know before the meeting, David had texted me saying that everything is on schedule and on budget. And that the big news is that the Marblehead Electric Light finished their underground power for the school this week. So that's great news. Sarah, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
We voted to approve the mural. I know it was featured in an article and it's also been out there on social media. So that was very exciting. And then we also voted to approve the landscape budget, which included, we did go into our contingency because we were over budget on that, but we're still within our main frame of a budget. And we were able to, by going into the contingency for that, we were able to really secure our scope and keep that the same. And that was our goal for all of that. So we're in a good spot.
Great. It's exciting. Yeah, the mural is really beautiful. I know a lot of work went into that and it's gorgeous. I am so excited to see it when it's finished. All right. That takes us to new business. Any new business? All right, there are two pieces of correspondence that were put in. I apologize for how late they were put in. Just to note them, the committee had received the, I'm gonna blank on the petition a couple weeks back. What, Sarah?
From Support Our Students, were you looking for the name of it?
Yes, the petition from Support Our Students. So that's in there for the official record. And then Kate Thompson had written us an email with a letter, or she wrote it to me and asked that it be put in correspondence. So it's in there just regarding, the work that it was done with communications and really in support of that communications position that's in the priorities this year. So just want to note those. That brings us to the second round of public comment. I've got two hands raised. So Erin.
Thank you, Sarah. I just actually just want to thank you guys for splitting comment. I think it's so great to be able to respond to like all the lively discussions that go on during the meeting, but also provide an opportunity for people that can't hang on as long to make their comment. So and I appreciate that there's active efforts to address the school committee response to comments issues, and I certainly can appreciate that it's complicated. It's a complicated thing in terms of how you respond to that. And maybe, what you were discussing about like how you're addressing that would be information that could be important in terms of like that, like an FAQ or info output, like Megan was talking about around the budget. Like maybe that becomes like a semi-annual kind of like communication of like hot topics at the school committee or something. But my real comment was, I was just kind of like taking down some notes, but I would just like to see on the agenda soon, like a public conversation around the general trends from our mid-year and ongoing assessments, and whether they're aims at the elementary schools or teacher assessments about our learning loss, and also about the social emotional needs. Is this something that, we're even able to capture at this point? And this kind of blurred into the MCAS discussion, right? Like, I agree so much with, with Nan, that this is that the data collection that we get from the MCAS is really, is really important. And I totally respect that. As somebody who completely values like every single day at this point that my kids can attend school, I don't want to lose sight of with all the modifications that they've made with the MCAS this year. I think that first of all, the high school students who I think would feel, the most stress around testing at this point, I think that they're sophisticated enough to appreciate that MCAS are really not about them, but the district. That's just, maybe you could do a survey around that or whatever, but that's my understanding. I know that it's not contingent this year upon or the graduation isn't contingent upon the MCAS this year. I would hate for us to lose out on that data, because it is just, aside from, and you have to have a really good, strong sense of, from the principals, that our teachers are able to kind of be able to capture this data. I think that also people are able to opt out. Maybe that's a communications thing. If you want to opt out, you can. And, I just think it's a really important tool to be able to tell generally where we have had gaps. I know that the principals have said, and that we are that we're on target, in terms of where we were last year, but let's all be honest about the fact that we've modified, the state has modified the curriculum frameworks. And so so one of the things I want to say is the agenda item that I would like to see on there is just in the coming future is about learning loss and pandemic related educational needs. And the reason that I'd like to see it as an agenda topic is because it seems to be that it would inform how we would spend our upcoming ESSER grant money, and I appreciate that we've held over some money, but are we going to have some summer learning opportunities for students who fell behind this year? I just think without the data, I think so I'd like to see it as an agenda topic just generally as a district. And then in regards to the MCAS and data collecting in general around this issue, I think it's very important. And I recognize that, we have limited time now in-person learning, but I think the long-term gains from this data, especially where they've modified this, it's could be a 1 day, maybe half a day type of assessment tool. Listening to Nan, I find myself very much agreeing that it's very important to have this data. And just looking through my notes, I'm sorry. And just in terms of how it informs how we're going to spend our upcoming, our relief money, So I think the MCAS are important. I really do. Unless you have a super solid confidence level in terms of, beyond the Ames assessment, that our teachers and our building principals are really confident in a general assessment level that we could track and collect that data. So that was really what I just wanted to express. Thank you.
Karen, Catherine Martin?
Yes, just quickly, I guess I'm trying to understand as we move into the budget season and the fact that one of the largest underfunded pieces of our budget is actually our facilities, and the lack of maintenance and the lack of planning that there seems to be kind of a misunderstanding of what a facilities committee does. They review the annual facilities plan, they work on the capital outlays, and they look to address long-term facilities needs. And that's exactly why you paid for that plan. And I certainly hope that perhaps we get it back before the budget hearing, so there could potentially be some funding of some of those needs. You do not assemble a facilities committee to talk about PPE and buying a few handful of extra desks. It's big picture, long-term problems that you're finding solutions to. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Brennan.
Hi, I just wanted to, first of all, say, Sarah, thank you so much for raising the issue about what's going to happen, especially at the high school level, with the potential for increased quarantines. As I understand it, the move to 3 feet raises the potential for more kids to potentially be swept up in the need to be quarantined for exposure. I could be wrong, but I guess I understood a little from you that you're hoping to get more guidance from DESE about whether the distance will be reduced from 6 feet to 3 feet. But even if that happens, we're 2 weeks away from these high school kids going back with no concrete plan for how to educate kids who might be having to stay home during the quarantine period. And the reason I wanted to speak tonight, I usually wouldn't, but at the beginning of the meeting, there was lots of discussion about economic equity in the schools. And I feel like this really speaks to educational equity. And, if you have kids at lower levels, maybe it's not as clear what's going on at the higher levels. But at the high school, because of the contract with the teachers and the technology issues, that there's not across the board teaching of kids home and in school at the same time. But what has happened is that certain teachers have been willing to do this. So it is conceivable that you could have, I'll just take an example, a sophomore or freshman, I don't know what year they take it, geometry, who their teacher doesn't want to do it. So they get their geometry 1.5 times per week under the current plan, whereas their student in the same grades teacher is willing to do that, and they're getting it the maximum number of times allowed under the schedule. So currently going forward in their education, they will have accessed more of the curriculum over the course of the year. Now, if a student is forced to go into quarantine under these, the same thing's going to happen. There's a potential that students whose teachers aren't willing to access this technology are without education for a 2-week period due to no fault of their own. And as we spend so much time talking about the emotional health of our students, across the board at the high school, there's a lot of kids who put a lot of weight on grades and stress on themselves. And I think if we just think about how stressful it is to be out of school with a cold for 3 days, imagine being a junior in high school, being out of school for 14 days, not accessing your classes or your education during that time. So I really think some thought has to go into how we're going to deal with this, what's going to happen. Worst case scenario, you could end up with a kid who has a kid in their class who's risky, who has to quarantine multiple times, and that would be a nightmare for some of these kids. And the final thought going forward with that is, at the high school level, you have kids, if you think about your juniors and seniors trying to prepare for AP exams this spring, missing 2 weeks is a lot. And if colleges aren't taking SATs or standardized tests, all they have to go on is grades. So it just brings in a whole lot of issues that I'm glad to hear you're beginning to think about, but I wish there was more of a plan. And I know my own high school student on numerous occasions has said to me, I'm really glad we're going back, but there's no plan if I'm forced into quarantine. So a lot of this, I'm sure, will be addressed by Dan. It's a school level issue, but to the extent it does tie back to the teachers and the union, I would hope that you or Dr. Bucky or somebody would begin to look at this and give some more information to both parents and students. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer. Can I just clarify on that? Because this did come up in our reopening meeting today, where we talked about kind of planning for that. So I know Dan and Matt, are working through that. But the other thing that we talked about with Deanna, and I think, and I'm sure it's going to go out in whatever communication goes out, but it was good for me to kind of understand the timeline around what that would look like to be out if there is, if a child does need to quarantine, whether they're symptomatic or especially if they're not symptomatic, if they're just kind of in the radius around
the direct contact.
Yeah. So that timeline is like I think she said it's
So you
five,
can,
you test it 5 days, you're back at 8.
Yep. Assuming you have no symptoms. If you're a direct contact, you test it 5 days, you can come back on 8 days with no symptoms, and then you monitor yourself for the rest of that 14 days, and assuming you don't show any symptoms. If you have tested positive, regardless of symptoms or not, you're quarantined for 14 days.
Right. So not that we don't have to address that gap. We absolutely do.
Right.
But it's not quite as, the timeline isn't as long as even I thought it was. And I think also communicating that piece to parents as well, so everyone's aware of it, would be very useful sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and we'll absolutely continue to talk about this. Sure. All right. Thank you, everyone. I will adjourn us at 10:01.